Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast. This is the monthly stuff for October 2025. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado. And the way I'm celebrating my birthday this week is by spending the entire day giving a midterm exam. Yay, me!
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and I haven't checked the news lately, but I'm feeling very, very confident in the traditional business of selling video games. You know, it's been weird since COVID, at least with the games industry, but I'm very optimistic that at this point, it's smooth sailing from here.
Sean, I have some bad news for you about the news segment of today's episode.
What? You mean video games are on fire? What's going on?
All right, so we're going to have that talk during the news segment of today's episode. We've got a fun monthly 10 challenge that you gave to me, Sean, where I'm going to give 10 lessons that I think 14-year-olds need to be taught. We're going to do some stuff, including talking about Hades 2, Ghost of Yōtei, some of the big game releases recently, and more. It's going to be a very stuff-filled episode, and I'm excited to be back in the purely academic saddle once again.
Yes, it has been a convoluted recording schedule for us on the back end, but I think we're now locked back into our regularly scheduled programming.
Hopefully, it's this has been a crazy semester. I know for both of us, but like there are some times in the many years we've been doing podcasts where, like, Sean, you know, you will have teaching stuff that's meaning that we're having to like rearrange stuff, and sometimes it's me. And the last few weeks have been very much it's me, and it's been a wild time. So yeah, and I am gearing up to the most complicated thing I have to do as a teacher in college is give exams, because when it's a big lecture hall class that's like 150 people, actually more than that this semester. And a lot of them have different like accommodations, and you have to consider like time and like spaces, and you have to reserve rooms, and you have to do all this stuff. It is a whole production, and it just so happens to fall on my birthday this year, and so I will be on campus until like 9 p.m. giving midterm exams, and it's going to be fun.
Yes, it's one of the times where I'm very grateful that my birthday always falls in the Thanksgiving holiday week. So I always have my birthday off. I've never had work or school on my birthday, and it's like nice. You know, I wish that went to someone who gave more of a shit about birthdays than I do, because I don't like do anything special for my birthday. But it is just, there is a certain smug feeling I get that it's like, yeah, I don't have to fucking do anything. Like you fools, and you're having to do shit on your birthday.
I mean, you don't get to choose when your birthday is, so I'm not sure if fools is the right word, but yeah.
You know, it's the universe. The universe has deemed you a fool, and so it has given you a shit birthday. I've got a good birthday, though.
Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, we've got all that going on. Sean, do you want to just dive right into the news?
Yes, we've got a very, very meaty news segment, Jonathan. So, what's going on in the news?
I feel like we have had, especially because we do this monthly now, we have had an Xbox Pricing Madness segment, just like every episode of Purely Academic.
Yes.
And here we go again. Xbox Pricing Madness, here we go again. They've gone wild. So they raised in middle of September all of their console prices again, which is going into effect this week at retailers. And they also announced at the very, very end of September, going into the beginning of October, a raise to Xbox Game Pass. So let's break all of that down and take stock of all of this. This is a big conversation to have. So the Xbox Series S, the base model that is a 512 gigabyte machine, is going from $379 to $400. The Series S 1 terabyte is going from $430 to $450. The Xbox Series X digital no disk drive goes from $550 to a full $600. The Xbox Series X with the disk drive goes from $600 to $650. The Xbox Series X 2 terabyte version goes from $730 to a full $800. And then the big news that I think just broke the last remaining Xbox fans out there is that Xbox Game Pass, the tier that is worth getting, the ultimate tier, is going up a full 50% in the United States, from $20 a month to $30 a month. They also announced the pricing of the Xbox ROG Ally, which is going up from which is going to be $600, and then the nicer version, the ROG Ally X, is going to be $1,000. So if you want to play Xbox, it is a pricey proposition now. Just to take stock of where we are as of October 5th, 2025, which is when we're recording this, PS5 prices are as follows. The digital base version with no disc drive is $500. With a disc drive, it'll cost you $550. The PS5 Pro is $750. And over in Nintendo Land, the Switch 2 is still $500, the Switch OLED is $400, the Switch Standard is $340, and the Switch Lite is $230. All right, lots and lots to go over here, including the Game Pass news, which maybe feels like the most significant. There was a report from Bloomberg indicating that, as you and I predicted on this podcast this time last year, Microsoft lost about $300 million in revenue by putting Call of Duty Black Ops 6 on Game Pass and not just selling the fucking game to Xbox players. All right, Sean, I will let you react first. What the hell?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot going on here. So with the console prices, obviously that stuff you can associate very strongly with tariffs, right? Like, I mean, the reason why that is happening the way it is tariffs exacerbated by there's other shit that's been going on that's prevented consoles from reducing in price, right? There's all those things as well. But obviously with the hardware stuff, especially for Microsoft, because their business is so centralized in America, Xbox, as far as I understand it, is basically dead as a platform everywhere else in the world, right? It's never had much of a traction in Japan. Most European countries have not, never had a huge hold with Xbox, but recently, over the course of the past year, there's just been lots and lots of reports of people living in various European countries just being like, yeah, no, they just don't fucking sell them anymore. I don't know. If you go to a store, they're just not there. And that's been happening for a while. And so I think Xbox is hit substantially harder by the nature of these tariffs than these other companies like PlayStation, Nintendo, but at the same time,
well, as evidenced by the fact that like Xboxes are now at least $100 more than the equivalent PlayStations.
Yes.
So like the Series X digital is $600, the PS5 digital is $500. The Series X with a disc drive is $650, the PS5 with a disc drive is $550. So like the tariffs, but also for those other reasons, Xboxes just now they're in a different pricing bracket than PlayStation or Nintendo.
Yeah, and it's pretty. So it's one thing to understand there are like factors that make it understandable how this has happened. But when you look at the range of the prices, it's just, why would anybody, if you're looking to buy a video game console now, why would you buy an Xbox? I mean, there's just no argument for it. I mean, I think the one that is the craziest is looking at the Xbox Series X 2 terabyte model for $800, which is more expensive than a PS5 Pro, which also, to be clear, is 2 terabytes. So it's like you get the same amount of memory. You also get the better version and all that kind of stuff. And so there's something very like insane about looking at that comparison. And it is just absolutely nuts. And it's where I think PlayStation and Nintendo are just so much better positioned to deal with the tariffs. I think their strategy for dealing with the tariffs so far has been much better. I think that there is maybe something going on here. This, I guess, transitions into the Game Pass part of it, where I just wonder if in the like every 4 to 6 months rounds of massive 1,000+ people layoffs that Microsoft has done, if they have finally laid off the last person who understands the expression about boiling a frog, right? And that you're supposed to just do it like little bit by bit and not in huge jumps. Because at this point, like, the last price increase on Xbox hardware was not that long ago. And so the frequency with which this has happened and the size of these jumps is pretty crazy. And so that with the hardware, that's, one thing. The biggest,
to be clear, they have had if you forgot, they've had 2 price increases on hardware this year.
Yes.
I know 2025 has felt like 7 years to all of us, but they have had 2 price increases.
Yes. So, and compared to like Sony and Nintendo have been much better about, it's felt like they kind of like waited. They took lay of the land, right? They obviously had their strategies for how to deal with it. They tried to hold off on price increases for as long as possible. It just feels like so far Nintendo and Sony have been much more even-keeled about how they have approached this. I'm sure that there's a lot of tension and discussion and debate within both those companies about how to deal with the tariffs, how it impacts their hardware prices, all that kind of stuff. But from the consumer side of things, they just seem way more confident in what they're doing, whereas Xbox is flailing madly, and they have been for a long time. And I think the biggest thing evidencing this is the Game Pass increase, which is crazy. I think this is the thing that it caught everyone hugely off guard. Just as a recap, it's about a little bit more than a year since they did their last price increase. It was, I believe, July last year that they did their price increase, and then they also that's when they did their whole like reframing what the different models were and all that kind of stuff, right? So they already did a huge mix up of the way that Game Pass worked, and there's a whole thing where now there's like that mid-tier model that doesn't get all the day one games and all this shit. Like, I don't really understand how Game Pass works anymore because I haven't used Game Pass in years at this point. But that was like about a year ago is when they did their last mix up. Now it is a full 50% price increase to $30 a month, creating the absolutely hilarious total of $360 a year. It felt like someone at Microsoft still has a really great sense of humor. And they're like, you have to wonder if they were debating, well, we could do like $28 or something. It's like, no, come on, guys. Fuck it. Let's just go for it. Let's the video games traditional media is in a real bad place. Let's give them a great headline, boys. Come on, $360 a year. Let's go for it. But like, that's a crazy amount of money. Like, that's just an absolutely nuts amount of money for a service that I feel like lots of people have cooled on over the years anyways. As I think like the nature of that service and I think the difficulty of actually taking advantage of Game Pass has just become more and more obvious in lots of people's lives, where it's like, I feel like if you're not maybe like in high school, if you're like an adult who has a job, the reality is you do not have enough fucking time on your hands to play enough games for Game Pass to be worth it. Especially if you're not playing the games that are like the games that you specifically want to play. They're just the games that you get to play off of that service. And for a long time, it's like the deal for Game Pass, especially when they had their crazy, like, you can get 3 months for $1, and they're kind of like extra special, sales and stuff like that, which is how I've ever used it. Like, made that a thing that you'd never had to think about. For $20 a month, that's already like a huge amount of money. For $30 a month, if you're someone who wants to like work the value of that service, that's like your fucking job, is just figuring out how to get $30 a month out of Game Pass and still live your life. Like, that's just that's so much fucking money. And it just, I think, totally turns the whole notion of subscribing to the service on its head. I think it's like, for the average person, I think it would be very, very difficult to realistically get $30 a month worth out of Game Pass. It's just nuts.
It's nuts. And like, they paired this announcement with adding a bunch of games to Game Pass that they tried to sell as like, look at all the value. But the games were like, the big one was Hogwarts Legacy. If you don't know, Hogwarts Legacy is a game that you can routinely get on sale for $20 or less in the like premium, all DLC, all your like special wizard points package, right? Like, that is a game you can get for cheap on any platform very easily. And then also it was like all the Assassin's Creed games. There are no games that are cheaper to get on sale than Assassin's Creed. You can buy like bundles of all the Assassin's Creed for like $5 at various points throughout the year. So like, it's hilarious. But like, let's look at like, obviously the best case scenario for this, and also the reason partially this is happening, is Call of Duty. Call of Duty is a $70 game. And at $30 a month, that means like over 3 months it would take to pay for itself, right? Or like surpass the price of the game. So if you play Call of Duty for more than 3 months of the year, which I think most Call of Duty players do, it is just straight up a better deal to buy the game outright, right? Like, so the price proposition goes way out of whack, but also like for Microsoft, I mean, you and I have said this, Sean, for like 10, not joking 10 years, for like 10 years now, that Game Pass does not make sense. It does not make sense in the way a lot of the like streaming subscription models today do not make sense, but it's at such a higher level than something like Netflix or Disney Plus or any of those, because like, I was just doing the math on this the other day. I'm like, let's say again, Call of Duty, $70 game. When Game Pass was $20 a month, making equivalent revenue to a game sale, new money that wasn't otherwise coming in, would require you to get a brand new subscriber who buys Game Pass and then would have to keep it for at least 4 months to get $80. Even at $30 a month, that's still lopsided. It's like 3 months. And like, That kind of math doesn't, I think, work for like streamers like Netflix either, but at least the value proposition makes more sense there, because what you're replacing with like a movie is a movie ticket, which is like on average about $10, right? And most streamers charge more than $10 a month. So if someone signs up for that one movie, they're getting a similar amount of revenue. The basic problem has always been very, very obvious, which is that games are sold for like 6 to 7 times more money than movies are sold for in theaters, and like double the box set of a TV season on DVD. So Game Pass was trying to sell itself like Netflix, but it wasn't trying to sell itself with a 7x price premium. So none of it ever made economic sense, on top of what you're talking about, Sean, which is that, like, it makes sense to buy a Netflix or a Disney Plus or something because you can watch lots of TV in a month. But people don't play 7 games at once. And most people, I don't know anyone who plays games that way. I sure as shit don't play games that way. Maybe I play 2 games at once. But, like, the whole proposition of it is weird and borked on every measure, and it feels like someone at Xbox finally figured that out, but in a way that like feels like they maybe just need to close up shop, because this is not going to work.
Yeah, well, because I think there's just the strategy for Game Pass for so long has been motivated by, you know, that desire of we've got to get as many subscribers as possible. This is where the whole business is moving and all this stuff. And, you know, obviously it's like Microsoft as a company moved in that direction anyways with the way that they reworked how Office works forever ago to be this subscription-based model. But it's like games just has not... It just doesn't make sense for the way that people consume video games. Most people play a couple of games a year at most. The average person who plays a console game, right? If we put aside like the other kind of like free-to-play stuff, you know, and people who play Fortnite all the time, but someone who is going to buy an Xbox and traditional video games, the kinds of games that are on Game Pass, they're playing Call of Duty and like FIFA or Madden, and maybe like an Elden Ring, you know, like one big RPG or something like that hits really big. They're, you know, a Skyrim, something like that. The average person who plays games is playing less than 4 games a year. Like even you and I who play lots of games, we struggle to play 10 games a year in order to do the top 10 list sometimes, you know?
At least 10 new games, we should say. Like,
exactly. Yeah, to play 10 new video games in a year, especially if you're someone who likes to play longer games, if you like RPGs, if you like strategy games, stuff like that. Like, unless you're playing lots of indie games and like games like puzzle games and stuff like that are shorter, you're just going to struggle to get like actual value out of that Game Pass service. And so it's just always been this super awkward fit that Microsoft has really hinged their whole business on forever. And they used, you know, their kind of loss leader strategy of having crazy deals and all this kind of stuff to get people bought into the service. And it hasn't worked because they couldn't sell consoles for to have enough consoles out there that people bought to then want to be subscribers to Game Pass. Limits the scope of who can be in the service in the first place. On top of like, I think the awkward fit of these subscription services anyways for video games to have the kind of scale of a Netflix, even then Xbox was just never positioned to take advantage of that if it did work. And so it's just a strategy that has been failing for a very, very long time now. I think it's very clear with this move that it is just a failed strategy, that Game Pass, as it was up till this point, is just not a thing anymore. Like Game Pass is becoming something different for Microsoft. I mean,
the other elephant in the room is that the pitch that separated Game Pass from, say, PlayStation Plus, it's like top tier, is that they put their first party games on the service, right?
Yeah, day one.
Xbox does not put out enough first party games for that to be a selling point. They never have. They're so bad about getting games out. We've talked about this over and over again. Maybe now that they own half the fucking industry that could change, but like, it's not just about putting games out. You have to have some kind of identity, right? Like, if you think about the successful streaming services like a Netflix or a Disney Plus, they have, one, a steady stream of original stuff, but also a kind of like original stuff formula that makes like people who like watching Netflix like probably a certain kind of show. And maybe it's different sections of it, because like Netflix makes a lot of reality, they make a lot of dramas, they make a lot of something. But like if you're in that, you know, vein, you go there. that's just not how Xbox games works. Like, if any console manufacturer were to do something like this and make it work, it would be Nintendo, because Nintendo is pretty disciplined about having a big first-party game out every month of the year. But there's a reason why Nintendo doesn't sell a subscription like that, because they know with every one they put out, 1 month of a year, they can make $70 on that, and they're not going to sell a $70 a month subscription. So Nintendo is fucking fine without doing that. And it again kind of betrays what a weird fucking move this is.
Yeah. And then there's that Bloomberg report, which is obviously like this is, because there's been lots of conversation post this report by various analysts and stuff discussing these numbers of how, like, I'm sure that there's no, like, the nature, this is part of the thing I've always had philosophically with these subscription services that has never made sense to me from, like, a business perspective, is that there is no way to actually calculate these kinds of things, because, like, where and how this revenue comes from and all that kind of stuff is super vague, because you can't know how many people have subscribed to the service specifically for this one thing, or when they drop out. That's why they have all these surveys always about, why are you dropping this subscription, which I don't know if other people like me, but I never fucking fill that out because I'm done with the service. I don't give a shit. I just opt out.
I fill it out of spite, and I usually just put you're too expensive.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't, at that point, I just don't care about the service, that I just move on with my life, and leave it. But so, whether or not the $300 million in revenue loss is 100% accurate, I'm sure it's not. It might be bigger than that. It might be less than that. But the point being that, like, they're not making the same kind of money they would be if they were just selling the game. And this because they've started selling all of their games on all the other platforms, because they can't fucking do it, right? They're trying to get every game they reasonably can on PlayStation and on Switch 2, so that way they can sell their games for full price and actually make money on them. And I think it's just that Activision Blizzard King purchase just so put a huge bullseye on the Xbox team's back, from the perspective of the rest of Microsoft, of, if this is the kind of money we're moving around for this section of our business, like, we got to see some fucking return for this money we're doing. And Game Pass being this sort of, like, middling strategy that long since, at the point of the ABK merger, as we know from the legal trial that happened around that merger, Game Pass was so far away from its targets of that they eventually wanted it to have like 100 million subscribers, or whatever the fucking crazy number was, by like 2030. It's just like, it's never going to happen. Like, that ABK merger just made it so clear that this Game Pass strategy doesn't really make sense from that big picture perspective when you're dealing with a game like Call of Duty. But if it doesn't make sense if you're dealing with a game like Call of Duty, maybe it just doesn't make sense. Like, maybe, especially if it as the thing that you're hinging your whole business on, if Call of Duty doesn't fit in that model, then that model doesn't fit for the thing that is your whole strategy for your console. Maybe it can fit for one part of your business, the way that Sony and Nintendo use their subscription services as like a value add for their most like dedicated customers and that kind of stuff. And in a very targeted way with very select games over specific periods of time. But Call of Duty just made it so apparent that Xbox's Game Pass idea with day one Game Pass just does not make sense. And as soon as Call of Duty became part of the equation, I mean, this service is just wildly more expensive than it was just a couple of years ago. It's crazy how quickly it has accelerated in its price, how its whole structure has transformed under the shadow of Call of Duty getting put day one on that service. Like, it just broke the entire business model that Xbox was trying to put together, because it put enough pressure on it to make it clear that it was a strategy that was never going to work.
If these numbers are remotely accurate, I ask, as I do every time we do one of these segments, Sean, how does Phil Spencer still have his job? Because if the reporting last year was that it was really controversial within Microsoft to put Call of Duty on Game Pass, and Phil Spencer was the one who went to the mat for that, he was wrong. He was wrong to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, which has now necessitated a new pricing strategy that is causing a like massive revolt with nothing but negative like feedback. I don't know if I'm trying to struggle to think of like in any other industry how you could do like what would the equivalent of that be Sean, for like you at your job? Would it be just like for 6 months you forgot to teach English and we're just showing YouTube videos? Would you get to keep your job, Sean? I don't know.
No.
This is quite the fuck up.
Yeah. What's very funny is that there was, we've talked about how it's been a crazy semester. It has for both of us. There is a scenario that I could raise that would not be appropriate with specific details for the kinds of shit, the level you could go to of like inappropriate, not criminal to be clear, but inappropriate shit that would get you fired. Of the laziness of not wanting to do your job that a certain hire did this year. So I have seen that per se. And then I had my first year teaching where I had my quote unquote mentor teacher who went on his peyote vision quest, which I talked about at one point on the podcast a couple years ago. And that dude was not there for very long. To be clear, he wasn't on peyote at the school. That was over the summer break. And then he had his sort of whole life fell apart. He was like, I need to do something else because I had a drug vision quest. But that's the level of shit. And yes, in the world of teaching, even with how hard it is to fire a public school teacher, like you have to go pretty far to like fully get fired by the school. Yes, there's just a level of like, Phil Spencer has been steering this ship for such a long time, and the ship has gone very, very far aground, and it feels like they're still trying to pretend like they're in the middle of the ocean, but they're like, fucking in the middle of a desert at this point. They've just kept on rowing into the sand.
It's like the captain of the Titanic, but he steered purposefully into the iceberg, and he did it over and over again for like 15 years. I don't get it. I read that report and I'm like, how does anyone on the Xbox team still have a job? Why is Black Ops 7 on Game Pass this year? Like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, and I know they're raising the price to try to head that off, but like, next year's Call of Duty will not be on Game Pass, right? Like, it can't be. Or the idea is that Game Pass is going to become such a niche product, they're going to force people to go buy the game instead. Like, it's going to be so clear that, once it's $30 a month, I could just buy the game. That's not much more. But I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting thinking about the Phil Spencer stuff, that it does feel like, I know that he was at TGS, which just happened recently, but it does feel like there was a period there where it felt like Phil Spencer was like out there doing interviews and on live streams and stuff constantly, particularly in the Xbox Series era, like the early Xbox Series days, those first few years. And it really feels like that has like stopped. I don't know if you have the same impression, but it just feels like Xbox is way less kind of public. I mean, you just think about back when all the shit with the multi-platform stuff started, and it was just this like constant string of Xbox execs and, Phil Spencer and Matt Booty and Sarah Bond and all of them, whether it's tweeting or it's getting on videos, and they had that like weird podcast where they're like, we're only going multi-platform with 4 games, guys, don't worry. And the asterisk with the like lawyer ladled language of the like, it's just 4 games, we promise. It's like, yeah, just 4 games. It feels like the vibes in the like community around Xbox has turned so hard in the couple years since we've started this multi-platform stuff, that especially this Xbox Game Pass news, like I've not seen the kind of like dedicated Xbox fan base become this negative. To the point where it feels like Xbox's like kind of PR strategy has had to shift really dramatically, because I just imagine that they probably do not want to be on interviews with like influencers like Kind of Funny and stuff like that kind of regularly had Phil Spencer interviews every few months for a long time. That just feels like it's just completely stopped at this point.
Oh, I mean, and I can just say this, I've said this before, but like, when you and I used to do segments and we would go, what the fuck is up with Xbox? We would get really negative comments about that. If I tweeted about, like, what the fuck is Xbox doing? You would get a lot of Xbox diehards going, no, Game Pass is the best thing ever. And now it's like, if anything, when we talk about Xbox, the comments I get are like, you guys weren't negative enough. Like, the Xbox fanboys have flipped so hard that it makes sense that they're not doing PR, because all it would be is negative, repercussions. If you went on Kind of Funny, what questions would they have that would result in a nice interview? Like, there is no positive press anymore. And at this point, Xbox's best option is just to kind of get out of this side of the business and become a publisher. And publishers don't have a Phil Spencer who's out there talking like this about stuff, right? Like, before Activision was bought by Xbox, I couldn't have told you who was at the top of Activision going and doing interview hits because you didn't know, right?
Yeah, like you knew that the CEO, if you follow the stuff, you knew that, okay, Bobby Kotick is the CEO of Activision and he seems like a fucking piece of shit. But he's not out there giving interviews. If he's giving interviews, it's for like the fucking Wall Street Journal or, some kind of economist magazine, not for like gaming publications because video game people don't give a shit who owns the company. They care about who are the people making the games. Other than for first party, because that first party feels so attached to the people who make the games. That's why you have your Iwatas or like Jim Ryan was the head of Sony and stuff like that. Like their names get out there, they get out there for interviews. But other than that, you just don't see it. And I feel like that.
So Sean,
Lee should lead us into this next section here. That is more of the speculative piece, because this is like one part of this is like really rapidly developing and is more rumor based, but is rapidly developing enough to feel like putting it on. Before we talk about that, let's do one thing that is reported on that is like more like, okay, this seems very legit. So there was a report by The Verge, Tom Warren at The Verge, that Microsoft is rolling out or is planning to roll out a free quote-unquote version of xCloud that is ad-supported, so that you don't have to be subscribed to Game Pass, which is currently the only way to use xCloud, which is their cloud streaming service, that there would be a way to get access to that, but with ads. And it is currently in a sort of internal testing phase. Now, obviously, if this ever gets rolled out publicly, some of these specifics would, I assume, change, but the way the internal test currently works is it allows players to stream select titles that they own. Keep in mind that xCloud is still currently not at the place where you can just stream any video game. It's only certain titles on like Game Pass and some titles that you own, and they constantly saying like they're expanding it out more and more over time, but it's not yet at the point where you can just stream any video game. So you select titles that you own, and you'll be able to stream it for 5 hours free a month. For 1 hour limited sessions, so you could do one consecutive hour at a time. And those sessions would start with 2 minutes of pre-roll ads. And this is something we know that Microsoft has been wanting to do. Like a big part of their strategy shift that's been happening over the past couple of years is emphasizing xCloud more and more in the cloud streaming service stuff. And so this seems like the next step in their kind of changing strategy and feels like a very dramatic, we are moving away from Game Pass being the be-all, end-all of our business, alongside the $30 thing that obviously is doing that as well, is looking at how can we get this available for people for quote-unquote free. Obviously, it's not truly free if it's being supported by ads. They're getting the revenue from a different place. But this is an interesting notion to me. I would have to see like what the actual like, because there's no way it would be 5 hours free a month. It's just no time in the world of video games. Like, that's just nothing. So you'd have to see what the actual kind of limitations would be of the service if it went wide. But I'm extremely skeptical about the idea that people would use this. That someone who's bought the video games, right? Like, I think when people, it's the same thing with Stadia, that people hear the idea of like streaming games and they get a vision in their head of what the business model and the applicability of that is, and it's never what the actual service is. Because it's like, Stadia was not a subscription service, which everyone just assumed it was until that service was dead. Then anyone who tried to use it was shocked by like, wait, you mean I have to pay $60 to buy Assassin's Creed to stream it? And it's not just I do $5 a month or something. And then for this, it's like, it's quote-unquote free video game streaming, but for a video game you've paid money for. You're not just getting to stream a video game for free. And so it's like, I just really desperately struggle to come up with the hypothetical customer that would make use of this service.
This is the stupidest fucking thing I have ever heard in my entire life. Number one, game streaming sucks. xCloud is bad. You can go look at like people like Digital Foundry have done the tests. It's worse than like PlayStation streaming stuff, which PlayStation doesn't even advertise, but it's worse than that. It's just a bad service. All game streaming is a bad service. There's just no way to make it good. It just does not make sense with the way internet infrastructure exists today and probably for the rest of our lives. It's a bad idea. But like, adding on ads to that to like just make that experience even worse, it's so stupid. But also from a business standpoint, the reason why they're thinking about this is it's again the same mistake Game Pass made, which is trying to assume that you can copy and paste the model that TV streamers have been using onto video games. Because one thing that a couple of years ago, we were in a place where it felt like the streamers like Netflix, Disney, all of that was maybe a bubble that was about to like really burst. And the thing that helped to even that out was the introduction of all the ad-supported tiers. So Netflix has an ad tier, Disney everybody has an ad tier, and the ad tiers are generally pretty cheap. They're almost all under $10 a month. They're very affordable, and the way the ads are like put out and everything, it's a model that makes sense to people, like customers intuitively, because TV has always had ads. Like that's just a thing that has been part of the business model for TV forever. So if you pay a little bit and then you watch some ads and they're in commercial breaks, TV shows are still made where you can put in the commercials and stuff. It doesn't feel like the worst thing in the world, and you still get your show. And to be clear, the quality of your show is like not degraded by the presence of the commercials. They're not streaming it in like shitty quality where it's hitching every 5 seconds like a video game would be. But also from a business standpoint, it makes sense because it helps even out the problem with streaming revenue, which is that subscription revenue is a static thing. You get that amount of money every month, right? But the amount of money you're putting into your shows is not static. And with the old model of like network television and cable, if something was ad supported and you had a big hit show, the ads for that big hit show were more valuable than the ads for a little show, right? But now that they have ad supported tiers again, that logic can return. And I think it's like, and I think there's been numbers proving this, that like Netflix probably makes more money on some of those ad supported tiers than they do on the non-ad supported tiers, because those ads can be very valuable, right?
Well, and actually, John, there's a specific thing of this is not that kind of streaming, but for like Twitch streamers, there is that where you have like Twitch Prime or whatever the fuck it is, the subscription stuff. And there are some Twitch streamers that make more money if they push their subscribers out of the premium tier that gets rid of the ads on the stream and pushes them down to a lower level subscription tier that retains the ads, because the streamer gets enough views that they make more money. So they actually try to get their viewers to go to that. So like what you're saying is very accurate. That like the way that ads can be dynamic in how things that are more successful get more money that way is a very big reality of that subscription, or of the way that can fuse with the subscription model, whether it's straight Twitch or Netflix or whatever.
And this is the reason why ads have been the bedrock of like TV and this kind of thing since the 1950s, right? Like it is an almost 100-year-old model, and there's a lot of like data around this. Like the Nielsen company has kind of roared back into prominence because it's able to help sell ads for streamers like Netflix. So this logic makes sense. None of that applies to video games.
Nope.
Absolutely none of that applies to video games, because one, unless you're going to literally interrupt someone's gaming session for ads, which sounds extra shitty, it's like this static thing where you have a certain set of pre-roll ads, but they're probably not selling them based on which game is more successful. If they are, like, they would have to be inventing a whole new kind of like ad rollout that they'd have to explain to advertisers. Again, the infrastructure that existed for TV that could just be transplanted to Netflix doesn't exist for games. The whole thing is bizarre.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is people who play these kinds of video games don't want ads. Like, I think the problem is it's like Xbox, it's the Game Pass thing, it's all this shit. Is like Xbox has been chasing a strategy to try to get the traditional premium video game market to like take advantage of things that there's a whole other kind of video game that's already has that market. And that's your, free to play forever games, whether they're mobile or not, or like really what it is, it's a fusion of that space with your Fortnites or Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, right? All of your MiHoYo games. The kind of gamer that they're looking for, the casual video game player who does not want to buy a $500 console or $800 console or whatever it is now and put it under their TV and, buy their, but doesn't want to buy the $70 video game, wants to stream it or whatever. The sort of like weird mass market person that they keep on saying is like out there because there's all these people who play games and we need to tap into that market. It's like, those people aren't interested in these kinds of games. Like, and it's something I feel like is very apparent in my job because I work with young people all the time, is like there are some young people who are into traditional premium games and they will come talk to me about Ghost of Yōtei. Like I had a bunch of kids come talk to me the other day about Ghost of Yōtei that they were excited about, but those are not the same kids who are coming up to me and talking to me about what they did in Roblox over the weekend, or the latest Fortnite game, or Genshin Impact, right? Like some of these, there can be some crossover, obviously. Like you can be someone who, like me, enjoys Genshin and traditional premium games, and stuff like that, and you can maybe play Fortnite and Call of Duty. It's not like it's, they're completely separate circles on that Venn diagram, but the overlap on that Venn diagram is not gigantic. And so I think there isn't this market sitting there waiting to play, I don't know, fucking Gears of War for free cloud streaming for, with their ad roll. Like that's just not a person that exists, because that person is going to be playing some match 3 game on their phone that's free but supported by ads that they run locally on their fucking iPhone. Like those people who are that mass market casual audience have a different kind of video game that they're interested, that serves their video gaming needs. And it's not Call of Duty, it's not Gears of War, it's not Forza Horizon, it's certainly not fucking Halo. It's just, these are different segments of the larger video game market. And instead of doing what like Nintendo and Sony do, which is try to like leverage and take advantage of this one part of the market, the traditional premium gaming market, and then maybe send out feelers into that other side, which obviously Sony was not successful with their live service push outside of Helldivers 2. Nintendo has had limited success here and there with like their mobile games. Some of their mobile games have done well, some not well. But they maintain their kind of premium model and have held that down. And there is still a huge market of people who are interested in those games. It's like Xbox has just like sacrificed their traditional kind of premium video game model at the altar of this audience that does not give a fuck. And it's just, I cannot imagine these people using xCloud. Like, I just can't imagine, like, the kids I know that I teach for who play Roblox are not going to go fucking stream some Xbox game over xCloud because it's free ad supported, because also they would have to pay $70 or whatever to get the game in the first place, or be subscribed to $30 a month at Game Pass to be able to have the game to stream in the first place. Like, it just, I so can't understand how this would work. And I'm very curious to see it actually get rolled out. I want to see what the numbers are on how long you could play the games for and stuff like that. And I want to know who in the world would use it. Like, I'm just so curious who that person is, because I just can't fathom it.
I mean, if they want people to, if the goal is to have people, if everything is an Xbox is their goal, but you also have to buy the game to use this, just let people stream the game they bought. Like, what, does it really cost you that much? Like, what the fuck are we talking about? It's so stupid. Yeah,
you're subscribing for the right to stream the game you already own. It's wild. Right. Then there's this next part. Now, I want to preface this by saying this is very much rumor. And it's something that started hitting yesterday. And I questioned at first to even put it on the outline when I started reading the stuff yesterday. And then this morning, there were enough people that are other industry analysts and commentators like writing about this on social media, and a couple of articles written about it, that I felt like we should bring it up. So there's an Xbox insider / leaker named Sneakers SO, or that's his tag online, who leaked this information. Again, this is nowhere near confirmed. It could be wrong. This person has been correct about Xbox leaks in the past. They've also been wrong. Things can change. All those kind of caveats in place. But the nature of their leak was basically that early next year, there would be another huge round of Xbox layoffs, which I think is obviously going to happen regardless of this leak. There's just going to be another round of Xbox layoffs in February. You can set your fucking calendar to it at this point, how regularly they lay off people every 6 months. But that part of those layoffs would be a big shift in strategy that Xbox has now decided on, which is for them to abandon the dedicated hardware market, meaning that their currently planned next generation Xbox, which would be something closer to like what we think of as a console, not purely just a PC, but would be something that presumably would play like Xbox Series games and all that kind of stuff. That line of consoles, that device is dead, and that any Xbox hardware would be something like what has happened with the ROG Ally line, which is them partnering with something like the Republic of Gamers, Asus, right? These kind of other companies, Lenovo, to make like PCs in that front end. So this would not necessarily mean that that Xbox would not be dead, but that the dedicated line of console hardware starting from the original Xbox up through the series consoles would no longer exist, that line would be discontinued for no successor, and that they would be effectively a third-party publisher focused primarily on PC, where Game Pass and stuff like that presumably would still exist on PC. And this is what that rumor is. Again, this is big enough of a rumor that like people like Tom Warren at Verge have not commented on it directly, but said that this leaker has had, sources accurate in the past. There are like industry analysts like Jez Corden at Windows Central that has written about this. Matt Piscatella, who is at Circana, the like US data research firm that does all your video game numbers, has commented on this. So who knows if this is actually true, but it feels like it is very plausible in a way that has not been up to this point, that like really Xbox could have made a shift to say that device that they were planning on putting out is not going to be put out, and that they are fully shifting their strategy to be a third-party publisher first and hardware very much second.
I mean, it makes sense. It just makes sense. I don't... Here's the thing. Like, given where the prices are right now, and they're not going to be coming down any fucking time, any time before 2028. Let's just put it that way, And the fact that, like, any kind of new console or any kind of new console strategy is going to require another, like, big investment to get it ready to go. And we have had 2 back-to-back failed generations. This one, like, probably the most disastrous console generation anyone has had since, like, late Atari. I mean, it's just unprecedented in the modern, like, NES onwards era, right? The Xbox Series generation, how bad that has been. But you have this giant third-party... You could be the biggest third-party publisher. You have space to sell your games. You have all these games. Like... I don't know, if the goal is to make money, and it is, because Microsoft is a business, why? Why bother with another Xbox? It does not make sense. And I don't know why you would try to make another console at this point. I just don't.
Yeah, I think for me, like the things that are making this rumor like feel very, very plausible is one, is what's happened with this handheld PC device, right? So we know that because Microsoft said at one point that they were developing a dedicated Xbox handheld that is a separate thing from the Xbox ROG Ally line, that was going to release in tandem with that Xbox ROG Ally device. And they later said, before the ROG Ally was like, out and stuff, that they had canceled whatever that dedicated handheld device was and instead put all their kind of eggs in the basket of this Xbox ROG Ally thing and their modified version of Windows that runs on it and all that kind of stuff. And it feels to me like that is a kind of, if they are not going to make an actual next-gen Xbox, and they've scuttled that as well, that's just a precursor to this move. That they're like, well, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're just going to have Xbox-branded PCs. I don't know if at some point they have to change the name of the thing, because at this point it's not a box anymore. It's just an X, because they're not making the boxes for the Xboxes anymore. You're just slapping that onto an existing PC label. And, because it's very possible for them to try to push into this market that feels like they've been probing at, which is making some kind of PC that sits under your TV and has like a TV-friendly interface, the way that the Steam Deck obviously has been very successful within its niche of creating a handheld-friendly interface for a PC-based device, not a Windows-based device, but a PC-based device. That feels very plausible to me, that could be a direction you go in, and just say that the dedicated Xbox stuff is dead. It's like it's a fucking albatross around their neck. Like, they just can't deal with it. And the other thing that makes it very plausible to me is just the huge shift in Xbox as a company, or not Xbox, Microsoft as a company overall. They are so deep in the fucking AI shit at this point. Like Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, is like all the way in, buried in the AI swamp, just waiting for the fucking bubble to burst into, just wreak havoc on their company, because it's gonna fucking happen. And they've obviously been talking about and had demos and research things for like incorporating Copilot into video games and all this shit. But it's just, that seems like such a hard, weird use case. I can't, like Copilot is bad at what they have already tried to make it do, which is like basic shit. Like the notion that it could be your, like, help you play your video game and tell you how to get your achievement or whatever and give you a guide for how to solve the puzzle is like, fucking come on. Nobody is going to use I feel like even AI people know that shit's not going to fucking fly. And it's just, I think the Xbox and the AI push within Microsoft is a very awkward fit. The way that it was also an awkward fit with the subscription thing, but you could at least see how Game Pass could work in a different universe. I just don't see how the AI stuff could really conflate with Xbox as a like customer-based thing. Not like using AI tools to help make video games, whatever, but as a like customer interface that you engage with Copilot or something like that as part of your video game playing experience. Come on, that's just not going to happen. And
the one thing that I think holds me back from being like 100% certain they go the Windows like under your TV route is the other constricting factor here is that Windows 11 is an absolute nightmare, pants on fire disaster right now, particularly if you are doing gaming. People are fleeing it for other versions of like Linux and your like Steam OS and stuff like that. And again, if Steam wanted to put the screws to Xbox and kill them as a company, they could put out an under the TV box running Steam OS any day now. And it would be it, because Microsoft isn't going to be able to compete with that because their OS is a fucking disaster right now. So like that's the other thing that's like, I think that is an important context, Sean, is that Microsoft is on fire, not just Xbox.
Yes. But like, I definitely agree. But they have like their whole thing with the Xbox ROG Ally is that they are trying to design a version of Windows that solves those problems. I'm very skeptical that they will be able to.
Trying, but it's what they're trying to do. The operative word there.
Yes. Yeah. So it's like I think will be theirs in the same way that they tried to create the Netflix of video games with Game Pass. You could try to do it. It's and it feels like they should be able to make a version of Windows that can solve these problems. If Steam can do that with Steam OS, Microsoft should be able to do that. It's just,
Well, there's a lot of things Microsoft should... Steam had to do that because Microsoft sucks. Like, I don't know. Like, it's we'll see. I mean, I feel like, Sean, at this point, the bigger, more interesting conversation, like Xbox is dead as the thing we have known it as. That's not for debate. Like, whatever the future is, it's not what the past has been. And so the question now is like, what does the video game market look like in a world where the two major players are PlayStation and Nintendo, and they do compete with each other, but in a more oblique way than Xbox and PlayStation ever competed with each other, right? Like, that is clearly the future for this side of the market.
I mean, I would argue that that's already been what it's been for the past several years, right? And to be fair, like that is what the video game industry was like for a very, very long time. That the competing consoles were very different. I mean, that's what Sega and Nintendo, right? Like, I mean, those consoles, the Genesis versus, the Genesis was out well before the Super Nintendo. But also the Genesis and Super Nintendo are way more different than like the Xbox Series and the PS5 are. And
they played different games. Like most games were not on both, or if they were different versions and all that stuff.
And ports were basically a different version of, like, they had to make a new game to port it to that other console most of the time, right? And it was the same thing with like the PlayStation 1 versus the N64. It's like those were wildly different consoles. And if there was a game that released on both platforms, they were very, very different versions of games. And so I think that you can, I don't think there's a reason why you can't go back to that model, that there is still that competition. Like the Switch 2 and the PS5 are way more similar devices than the PS1 and the N64 were. And then the other thing is that Steam is in there as well. And that like the other competitor is PC. And I do think like that is just the nature of the market, is that it's a three-way competition between Switch 2, PS5, and Steam/PC, and the various, Steam Deck and the various devices in that sort of ecosystem, and that there's crossover, right? And there's like some things that the games that they all have, there are games that only some of them have. There are kind of market segments that each one is a little bit more specialized in. And I think that kind of works fine for this segment of the video game market. And Xbox has been a non-factor for a while at this point. I mean, their sales have been so poor. And
that honestly feels like, obviously there's lots of other challenges facing the video game world right now. I will say that dynamic you just outlined feels more sustainable than the thing we've been having since the 360 generation, which was the two slightly different versions of the same console fighting it out in this space while Nintendo does their own thing. Because the difference between Nintendo, PlayStation, and Steam is very understandable and like big, and like there are meaningful strengths and weaknesses to all three versions, right? And there's no, so like, I don't know, like that feels like a market in a more sustainable kind of competition where it isn't a zero-sum game battle to the death for anyone.
Yeah,
right?
Like it's very easy to imagine a consumer who owns devices in all three of those camps and uses them somewhat regularly, versus it's very hard. As someone who owns an Xbox Series S and a PlayStation 5, I could say it's very hard to be someone who owns both those things and is using both of them, because it's just like there's no reason to use the Xbox. And I think that's what you want for like a healthier market, is feeling like you've got these devices that are in competition but can also live kind of symbiotically as well. And I just think like Xbox has not been able to do that, especially since they went so multi-platform with putting all their games on PC and all that kind of stuff. Like the Xbox just has become such a non-factor. Plus, like they went through that long spurt of having basically no video games released. Like if you look at the like Xbox Game Studios releases, if you take Bethesda and ABK out of it, Activision Blizzard King out of it, like they just don't fucking put out Xbox Game Studios games anymore. Like it just almost never happens. It's insane to imagine a world where they didn't buy those other publishers, and what would their video game output actually be. Is kind of mind-boggling. So,
well, since they got to a point where they couldn't make fucking Halo games anymore, and it's their, it's just it's so stupid. All right. Let's move on to some other video game news, Sean, starting with a couple pieces of TGS news. Starting with, we got a trailer for Insomniac's long-awaited Wolverine game, which is now officially set for release a year from now, sometime in fall 2026. That trailer is extremely violent.
Yes.
What did you think of it?
You have a superhero whose powers is that he has knives for hands. Like I quite enjoy the trailer. It's got the it captures the vibe of like a Wolverine comic, like Wolverine in his own comic versus Wolverine in the X-Men, right? That's your like, how violent are you making it? It's a little bit more in that camp. Which I'm into. Like I like that version of Wolverine who is like, it's violent, but it's violent in this way where it's very kind of like, from the perspective of the character, it's very directed. Like I saw some people trying to compare it to like, oh, it's like Mortal Kombat. But to me, that's like a very like weird comparison with the kind of violence where for Wolverine, there's just he is killing these people in as efficient and thorough a way as possible and moving on with his day, which is what makes the violence to me kind of like palatable. In a way that with Mortal Kombat, it's about, with the fatalities, like causing suffering to this person. Wolverine doesn't give a shit about people suffering. He just wants to fucking kill them and kill the next guy and kill the next guy and kill the next guy until he's satisfied. And I think that dynamic they capture well. I like the design of the character. I like the just kind of like the vibe they give it of that kind of Wolverine focused story of this dude struggling with his anger and his memories and kind of trying to center himself as a person. It's a very brief trailer. It's like 2 minutes or whatever. You get like brief glimpses of the gameplay. You just get hints at the story. You see some other characters like Mystique and Omega Red in there. But overall, I'm pretty interested in kind of what they're putting down.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I'm interested in it because it's Insomniac, and they have not let us down in any way in a very long time. Like, their games are very good. They're very reliable. I suspect this will be very good. I didn't love the trailer. I think there's only brief snippets in there of actual gameplay, and in those, the violence did not bother me. The cutscene violence I thought it fatigued me a little. Like, I do understand the Mortal Kombat comparison. Like, it is different in the way you're saying, Sean, but like the degree to which like the blood spurting out and people's heads being ripped off is like lovingly recreated in 3D with all this detail. Like, there was a little bit like, I don't know if I need this in my life. And I do get it. Wolverine's superpowers, he has big knives on his hands. There is a certain amount of violence that has to be there. I want to see more in terms of like, okay, when you're actually playing it moment to moment, what is the experience of this? Is it gonna be like, is it really just like a kind of brawler platformer and there's blood spurting out? I'm totally fine with that. If it's going to be as graphic as some of the like cutscene material there, that's a level where I'm like, I don't know if I like, just personally, I didn't know if it felt like necessary to me. But it is like, again, end of the day, it was funny when I looked up on YouTube, it said gameplay trailer. I'm like, that's not a gameplay trailer. Unless, I guess in the sense of there's a lot of like clearly like Naughty Dog style playable cutscene kind of stuff going on, but like that doesn't count. I want to see like an actual level. Either way, like, I'm gonna play this game. I think Insomniac is it is hilarious how much Insomniac has been carrying the PS5 on its fucking back. Like, when you look at how many games they've gotten out versus any other PlayStation studio. But, yeah, I'm sure it's gonna be good. I was a little more on the line with the violence of it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, obviously the violence registered to me in the sense of, like, I was like, okay, yeah, this is like a Wolverine comic-ass Wolverine thing. Because I have some of those like Wolverine kind of one-shots that can get very, very brutally violent.
But there is like a whole history of Wolverine also in like kids' cartoons and TV shows and, you know, like the Hugh Jackman Wolverine in everything other than Logan. Like, I think I would say most people's association with Wolverine is not, like, person on the street is not hyper-violence. Like, I know that is a strand in certain comics and in that one movie. But there's also a large strand that is, like, you can imagine a version of this that is not, that he still has the claws and still has the same kind of gameplay, because it has existed before. There are other games that do this and are more arcadey with it. I'm not saying it's wrong or right, I'm just saying I can understand why people might be a little shocked, because that is not necessarily the singular mainstream version of Wolverine, right?
But I do think there was probably an instinct for Insomniac to want to kind of, in this kind of proper debut of the game, to sort of like lay down the chips of like, this is the kind of Wolverine that they're doing. Especially because I do remember that when the game was announced back at like the announcement of the PS5, and they had that like brief little kind of tease that basically was just like, we have the license for Wolverine, guys. That kind of video, that there were a lot of people rolling their eyes at the idea of an Insomniac Wolverine game, because Insomniac's games are associated with being very, less than T for teen, right? Like, it's Ratchet and Clank, and their version of Spider-Man has some like more mature themes than a Ratchet and Clank game, but it's not violent, it's not adult, right? It's not it's not M-rated, and it's not dealing with that kind of stuff, which is, if you are a big fan of the Wolverine character, a lot of his like main material in the comic books that is like the really acclaimed stuff is very adult oriented. And so I saw a lot of skepticism, and I had some around like, would they be willing to do that with the character and go to that version of Wolverine? Or would it be more like, yes, you're hitting him with your claws, but it's like when you're fighting a dude with a lightsaber in a Star Wars game, and it's just like, bah, 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 and you're like hitting them with like a big bat, basically. You're just kind of, your claws are glorified punching. And I'm much more intrigued by the notion of them making a game that's a Wolverine game that is going to that version of Wolverine, rather than the kind of like X-Men movie, again, not Logan, but like that version of Wolverine and that kind of vision of Wolverine, or the cartoons that always struggled with depicting Wolverine because he could never fucking do anything, because the only thing he could do was fucking kill people. And so he never really uses his claws. He never really fights people properly in the comics. All he can do is like cut their gun in half or something, and then he has to stop. So yeah, like I'm very intrigued by it, want to see more. Very, very, very curious about that game.
Definitely. All right. And then another piece of TGS news that is of particular import to this podcast is that we had Yakuza Kiwami 3 announced. It's coming out February 12th, 2026. For those who don't remember, the Yakuza Kiwami games are the remakes of the original Yakuza games. Kiwami 1 and 2 came out a few years ago, and now we are getting a full Kiwami 3, which is the first one that was... Yakuza 3 was a PS3 game, right?
Yes, that was the first PS3 Yakuza.
PS3, okay. So this, and 1 and 2 2 were PS2 games. They also announced the Yakuza Kiwami 1 and 2 are coming to the Switch 2 alongside Kiwami 3, and alongside 0, you will then have all 0, 1, 2, 3 on the Nintendo Switch. They also announced that the 0 Director's Cut, which was the Switch 2 exclusive version of 0, is coming to all the other platforms, PS5, Xbox, and Steam, on December 8th of this year. So lots of Yakuza goodness coming this our way, but I know people were very excited about this. You've expressed, Sean, before that 3 probably needed some kind of Kiwami remake, so why don't you tell us what you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about it. They're porting it to the Dragon Engine, which is their Yakuza 6 Onwards one, which was a little bit of a question mark because they did that Yuga Gotoku Ishin or Yakuza Ishin, however the fuck you want to translate it, but the one that's the Meiji era samurai game, that remake, which I enjoyed, had some issues because they ported that to Unreal Engine. I think that would have been UE4, and there was like some awkwardness with that, so it's definitely reassuring that they're making this a Dragon Engine game, which they have a lot of experience with, and Dragon Engine is very good for these kinds of games, and it'll be nice to have a Kiryu-style brawler again in that engine. But yeah, the original Yakuza 3 has some awkwardness just in that it's the first PS3 game. It's a very transitionary game for that studio. But the story in 3 I thought was really fun. This is the one where he's in Okinawa. There's a really fun kind of group of characters here. You've got, really importantly, you have one of the most memorable villains in the franchise, which is Mine. And that stands out because they are doing similar to Kiwami 2, which had a like kind of mini campaign for Goto that was an original, or Majima Goto that was original for Kiwami 2. It's kind of follow on from his story from 0. For Kiwami 3, they're adding a mini extra campaign called Dark Ties that features Mine in his backstory, and he's the bad guy from 3. And he's just a huge fan favorite character that, for reasons that should be obvious through implication, he's not in any of the other video games. So it's like if you wanted to get more Mine stuff, you have to do a remake of 3. And so I'm very excited to see that. I'm just excited to play another Dragon Engine Yakuza game. It is funny, though, that I remember seeing lots of comments about this when this announcement happened, of the kind of weird corner they've put themselves in with the titles for these video games at this point, with like the Like a Dragon versus Yakuza and what do you title them. And they just said, fuck it, we're just going to call it Yakuza Kiwami 3 and not Like a Dragon, Yakuza Kiwami 3 or something like that. And just, I do find it funny there that they can't quite let go of the original Yakuza title yet, that they still have to hold on to that for these remakes.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting to me, too, because I initially saw the trailer come out in Japanese, where it says, obviously, Ryuga Gotoku Kiwami 3. And I was wondering, okay, well, what are they calling? And then I kind of had to go find the English trailer, and it is just Yakuza Kiwami 3. And I assume it's because Kiwami 1 and 2 are already out and called Yakuza, and so it would be weird to call this one Like a Dragon Kiwami 3, and if you have a newcomer looking at it on the digital storefront, like, what's Yakuza Kiwami versus Like a Dragon Kiwami? And I guess it makes sense for games that were already called Yakuza to be grandfathered in, but it is still kind of funny.
Yes, it's just, it's a, Rambo versus First Blood, and, it's like if they tried to make a prequel to Rambo, and they're like, can we call this First Blood 0? Or it's like Rambo 0 First Blood Part 1/2. I love when titles with franchises get all fucked like this. It's just very amusing.
Yes. But no, this is cool, and I like to see that they're making an effort to get all of these out on Switch too, because that sounds awesome, and I still need to play 0, 1, all these original ones, and that might be a very fun way to do that.
Yeah.
So I've been meaning to pick up the 0 Director's Cut on Switch 2 when I have some free time, and it's cool that is coming to other platforms. I know the 0 Director's Cut, the extra content in it had some mixed reception, but I assume it'll have some nice visual bonuses and stuff too if you get it on PS5 or whatnot.
Yeah. It is notable for the Switch 2 ports that Kiwami 2 will be the first Dragon Engine game ported over. Because so far it's all been their old engine, which is what Yakuza 0 was built on. And they had not yet, for Switch 1, they put a bunch of the Yakuza games, but they had not yet moved any of the Dragon Engine games over. So this will be the first time that era of Yakuza game will come over. So presumably, obviously Kiwami 3's Dragon Engine, presumably this will eventually lead to a Yakuza 6, 7, 8, those other Dragon Engine games hopefully will come over as well.
Well, excellent. So we've got all that. And then final piece of news about the death of video games.
Yes.
EA Electronic Arts has been acquired by a consortium of the Saudi Arabia PIF, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners, the latter of which is Jared Kushner's really, really corrupt company. The purchase was made for $55 billion in a deal that leaves EA with $20 billion in B-rated low-quality debt, which means high interest, high risk, leading to concerns of cost-cutting strategies such as layoffs, extreme monetization, and the selling of IP. Yay!
Yeah, this is this is a doozy. I feel like this one is big enough to be outside of my wheelhouse in terms of like this is great. This is like a crazy trying to like unravel everything that's involved in here, because there's just the notion of EA becoming a privately owned company, right? And it no longer being public. EA being I believe now, after Activision was purchased, the largest third-party publisher. If you put aside like weird things like Tencent, which are not dedicated video game companies but own lots of video game developers, but as like a company that it is just a video game company and that's it. I believe EA was the largest, and the next largest would be Ubisoft. And I guess EA is now privately owned. And that's just kind of crazy to sort of conceptualize and what that means for the Western developed like video game industry in general. It gets a lot crazier when the majority of what owns EA now is the Saudi Arabian fucking government and Saudi Arabian royalty and Jared Kushner and his cronies. And it's like...
And Jared Kushner, if you don't remember, most of his money is from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
He worked in the first Trump administration and came out of that with billions in Saudi Arabian money.
Yeah. And, Saudi Arabia has been doing a lot of stuff over the years to try to whitewash its image. I don't know how to say this, but it obviously Saudi Arabia has a lot of fucking blood on its hands. And has made lots of kind of like attempts to create a sort of like cultural hegemony almost, or like a cultural export project to whitewash its reputation, particularly with America. You've got all the crazy shit it does with like WWE, the world, wrestling, which has had WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia a bunch of times and is like really, that company's really deeply tied in with the Saudi Arabian royalists. You had the big crazy fucking comedy festival that happened recently over there and all that shit.
Yeah, the Riyadh Comedy Festival. The other big one right now is golf, because they started the Live Golf tournament that has basically been going up against like PGA. And at first you had a bunch of pro golfers who said they wouldn't work with Saudi Arabia, and then they've caved. And I just want to extend a hearty fuck you to anybody taking Saudi Arabian money right now. Be you a shitty comedian complaining about free speech while going to the journalist dismembering country, or a video game publisher. Fuck all of you. You have blood on your hands. You suck. Fuck off.
Yeah, it's crazy, like all the shit. Because this is not the first kind of inroads that Saudi Arabia has tried to make into video games. They own most of SNK, the kind of traditional video game or fighting game developer. There was like all that weird shit in that last Fatal Fury game where they had the soccer guy and the fucking DJ that was in there, like real world human people being turned into fighting game characters, along with having to fight like Terry Bogard because of Saudi Arabian interests in their like working with these celebrities. It's just fucking crazy. So like, I really just don't know, and I don't think anyone knows what to make of this, like of what will happen with EA in the long term. Like, what are the plans with EA and its like properties and its developers? Like what happens to a BioWare I have my guesses about what would happen to a BioWare, but it is just a really wild thing. And I guess it's just kind of crazy to imagine that if you're trying to throw your money around to get into the video game space, that EA would be the company you'd go for. Obviously, EA is very successful with its sports games.
That's what they want this for. Like, let's be clear.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, a lot of their cultural investments like this have been in sports. It's the Live Golf. It's the WWE. They are buying EA for the sports stuff. I think BioWare is done. BioWare will either be sold or it will be shut down. I do not think Saudi Arabia and their money will have any interest in publishing whatever bad Mass Effect game they're working on. Like, I mean, BioWare as a company barely exists anymore. So, like, I just think anything that is not sports at EA is gone, whether that means it will be shut down or sold for parts. Like, honestly, the best probably the employees of BioWare can hope for right now is being sold for parts. Like, you know, that's what's going to happen. Or they're making Mass Effect Soccer 2025, and that's what we're getting next. Is Commander Shepard using all the powers to play some soccer in Riyadh.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons to say that, like, it's hard for anyone to know what happens here is because some of the things that it feels like when these Saudi Arabian princes get involved, you just get, like, really strange shit happens, you know? Like you know, that fucking DJ guy being in that Fatal Fury game where you're like, what the fuck? Like, who comes up with this? Who has this happen? And so it's like, because there is one world where BioWare just gets sold or just gets totally shuttered, but there is a world where BioWare makes a sci-fi FIFA game or some shit, and you're like, what is happening? And it's very, very bizarre. I mean, obviously, there's lots of industry analysts have pointed this out, but, you know, Saudi Arabia paid way more money to buy EA than EA was actually worth with $55 billion. So it's like, I don't think Saudi Arabia's interest here is not primarily generating revenue. Their interest here is as a cultural export in what that does for the reputation on the global stage and what it does for their relationships with America. And that's some of the stuff that just makes this so unsettling, is that it exists in a different way than other video game acquisitions we talk about, which makes it very strange and very hard to kind of wrap your head around what the consequences of this is going to be in a long-term fashion.
Yeah. And, you know, look, I know there are a lot of potential things to boycott right now, and it can be very exhausting to keep up with it. This is an easy one. Mm-hmm. Don't spend money on EA stuff, guys. Do not give money to the journalist chopping regime. Do not do anything that could make Mohammed bin Salman feel better at the end of the day. Just keep your dollars away from that. That's an easy one. EA's off limits. Fuck this shit.
Yeah, I very much second that.
All right. Finally, just because this is interesting and goes to what we last talked about on Purely Academic, Sean, is I wanted to give a quick update on the box office for the new Demon Slayer movie, Infinity Castle, because we talked about it a little bit when we reviewed the film, but that was during the first weekend. And it is hilarious how much it has still just grown, because while the film did fall off heavily in its second weekend at the US box office, as anime films tend to do, it was still number one 2 weekends in a row. At the end of its third weekend now, it's passed 120 million at the US, making it like far, far and away the highest grossing anime film here. Its current worldwide total is at least 620 million, potentially higher. Reporting is a little bit scattershot with foreign films, making it at the moment the 7th highest grossing film of 2025 worldwide, above Superman, Mission Impossible 8, and The Fantastic Four. It will almost certainly surpass F1 and How to Train Your Dragon to get to at least number 5. It is also now the highest grossing Japanese film worldwide. Mugen Train is at number 2, down at 500 million. And within Japan domestically, it's still at number 2 behind Mugen Train, but not that far back. It's hit the 35 billion yen mark to Mugen Train's 40 billion. And while it was finally unseated at the weekend number 1 box office by Chainsaw Man after I think like 10 weeks on top, it's still pulling in money every week in Japan, like good money, all of which is wild. The comparison I made last time we talked about this was like to Avatar: The Way of Water, a sequel to the highest grossing movie ever that mostly repeated that success. But Infinity Castle is actually doing better than that comparison, because while Avatar 2 did astonishingly well, no one at Disney was disappointed with it, it didn't quite hit Avatar 1 numbers, and Infinity Castle has blown past Mugen Train by every metric other than just domestic Japanese box office, and it is only part 1 of this trilogy. Fucking wild, right?
Yes, I don't think the people at Disney had on their fucking plans for Fantastic Four that they'd be beaten out by the weird anime, boys.
Yeah.
It's like, it's anime sword boy. Oh god, he's making more money than fucking the Fantastic Four. What do we do?
I mean, this is an underreported story. This is going to be the first year since Marvel Studios was formed, and Marvel has had movies out, that they will not have a movie in the top 10 at the box office, because Fantastic Four is at number 10. We've still got the new Wicked movie. We've got Avatar 3. there will not be a Marvel movie in the top 10 this year. That Fantastic Four movie definitely underperformed. They needed that movie to be much bigger than it was. Like, Marvel is fucking done. I don't think people have taken that in enough that, like, maybe that next Avengers does well, but if that's the only thing that they can make money on, they are so fucked. Disney too. Like, what conversations is Bob Iger having about replacing the, like, major pillar of their box office? Because it has to be a conversation happening. Anyway, this also means that Infinity Castle is the second highest grossing cell animated movie, or, planar animated, cell animated. Technology enters into that, but it's that process still. It is the second highest traditionally animated movie ever made, only behind Disney's original Lion King. And I think the idea that Demon Slayer has now outgrossed every other Disney movie ever is funny to me. Obviously, it's not a fair comparison because you have inflation. Like, Snow White back in 1937 sold more tickets than Demon Slayer has today, but it just still is funny to me.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like, it is, I mean, we talked about it on that podcast, but it's just kind of crazy to have grown up when we grew up with, like, the shifting nature of anime in America, and then to be at this place now as adults where this is, like, the hottest thing. I mean, this is, like, by far the most centralized interest I've seen amongst my students in any kind of cultural thing this year, with this, like, kind of group of students, is this, more so than any, I don't know, like, music release or any game or anything else. This is the one where, like kids who literally have never gone to a movie theater before, like, they had never seen a movie in a movie theater, because that's the nature of you're 14 years old today. That is not an unlikely thing, especially with, like, my demographic, which is mostly lower income kids, and were coming up to me and be like, Mr. Chapman, how much does a movie ticket cost? Like, how do I go see a movie at a movie theater? And I had to, like, explain this to more than one kid, how you go see this movie. Like, that's the kind of movie this is. And that's one, very cool, and it's also very crazy.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, you want to move away from the news and get into the stuff?
Oh, yes, because we do have quite some stuff to talk about as well. And that'll be more fun than talking about the death of video games. We'll be talking about fun video games.
Well, Sean, why don't we kick it off with, like, the most newsy games of the moment? I've been playing Hades 2. You've been playing Ghost of Yōtei. These are the two of... There's so many games out right now. These are two of the big releases of the last week. Do you want to go first with Ghost of Yōtei? I know that one's more recent, so it's only been out a few days, so you might not have a ton to say about it yet. Yeah.
So I have Ghost of Yōtei. I did also buy Digimon Story Time Stranger, because, I was like, fuck it, I might as well just put the money down. And if you're wondering, why did I play Ghost of Yōtei first? Because it came out one day earlier. that was the decision-making factor for me, between which one do I play first. Is it Digimon or Ghost of Yōtei? Ghost of Yōtei did technically come out one day earlier, so I just had it. I was like, oh, fuck, I'll just play this. So yeah, I'm not super far into Ghost of Yōtei. I played, some on Friday, and then a lot yesterday, which was Saturday for us. And it's awesome. I mean, obviously it's very similar, broadly speaking, to Ghost of Tsushima. They haven't, like, totally radically rechanged the formula. But it's a really great refinement of what Ghost of Tsushima was. And, like, kind of like every single piece of what it's doing is just an improvement over the original, which was already, I think, a really fucking great, open world, samurai game. With Ghost of Yōtei, I guess one of the things that's most impressive to me is the story and character stuff, which I'm really, really loving. The setup, for people who don't know, is this game is set several hundred years after the events of the original Ghost of Tsushima. It's set in the early 1600s. It's a little bit after the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate. And you are playing as a woman named Atsu, who, when she was a child living in Hokkaido, what they call Ezo in the game, but that's, like, the first colonized region of Hokkaido in northern Japan. Her family was killed by this man named Saito in this gang of people called the Yotei Six, who kill her family for reasons that are first kind of mysterious, and you slowly start to uncover it. And after her family dies and she is left for dead, she survives miraculously, and then she goes down to the south. And you get this cool little opening after you get kind of that setup, where you have this very stylized kind of like ink drawing thing of this kind of montage of her going south. she is this kind of wanderer who ends up working as a mercenary and joining the armies fighting in that Sengoku, the end of the Sengoku period, and she fights in the Battle of Sekigahara, which is the big battle that ends that whole long period of conflict that cements Tokugawa as the head of Japan. Sekigahara is like the decisive battle. After she fights in Sekigahara, she decides to go back to where she came from, back to her home in Ezo, and kill Saito and the other Yotei 6 and get revenge for her family. So it's that kind of like revenge setup. But the way it's positioned against Japanese history, I find very interesting. If you know a lot of the stuff, like it is not giving you a big history lesson on Japan. If you don't know what the Battle of Sekigahara is, they don't tell it to you. But if you know the basics of this period of history, it's a really interesting moment to set it against. And then also putting that with the notion of you're up in Hokkaido, which is yet to be fully colonized by the mainland Japanese people, the Yamato people. And so you still have a bunch of the Ainu living there, which are the native peoples of Hokkaido. But they're kind of being slowly pushed out of this region of Ezo, which sits in the shadow of this giant mountain, which is called the Mount Yotei, which is where the title of the game comes from. And so you have Saito's whole motivation as the antagonist is he is trying to, with this kind of band of outlaws, create a kind of free, quote unquote, Ezo for his people. Whereas there's this clan of samurai called the Matsumai who have been sent up by Tokugawa to bring this region under the control of the Tokugawa shogunate and make it part of the larger nation of Japan that is now starting to form for the first proper time in history. And so there's this very interesting larger backdrop that is very reminiscent of a lot of kind of spaghetti westerns in particular. The plot setup, I think, is pulling a lot from the very, very great Sergio Leone movie Once Upon a Time in the West. And so it is pulling obviously from samurai movie influence, but much more so than Tsushima. It's that kind of spaghetti western movie and then the spaghetti western kind of influenced samurai films, not the ones that influenced spaghetti westerns like Yojimbo, but the ones in the generation after, like late 60s, early 70s samurai, is very much the kind of tone and vibe that they're going for. And so that narrative setup is fantastic. And I think Atsu as the protagonist is just such a fucking cool character. I'm playing with the Japanese voiceover, which is just fantastic. And the voice actress who plays Atsu is Files I, who is in a lot of stuff recently. People would probably best know her as Power from Chainsaw Man, but she's in like basically everything these days. And she just gives such a fantastic performance. And she's just this ridiculously cool character that you're playing as, where I think the performance and the writing of the character captures this sense of when she's on her own, she has like a lot of kindness and empathy and gentleness. Like when you're interacting with the animals in the game, the way the character behaves there's a sweetness to her that's kind of buried deep down inside. And then whenever she's interacting with another human, she's like the coldest, baddest motherfucker you've ever met. And it's very cool. And there's just like really powerful dichotomy of the character and a kind of lot of rich shades to her and how much pain she's in, and how shitty the world has treated her. And I think they've done a very good job of having the fact that you're playing as a woman in this time period feels like it very much informs the character, informs her relationship with the people around her, without like being like ridiculous, hitting your head over with it like Disney girl power style, but in this very like mature way of considering the fact that as a woman who has to live through violence, her options in this world are very different than the kind of men around her. And some of the stuff in the part of the game I'm playing in right now is a lot of very interesting narrative stuff around that. So far, I think one of my favorite things about the game has just been that narrative stuff. I really enjoyed the story of Ghost of Tsushima, but I think it took a long time for the story of Ghost of Tsushima to really get going and for you to get into the meat of what was interesting with that story. And the opening of that game was very long and just took a while to get into it. Whereas Ghost of Yōtei, you're like into it immediately. It thrusts you into the heart of the narrative adventure right away. Like within the first hour of the game, you are in the open world, like doing stuff. It is one of the things that contrasts it pretty dramatically with not just Tsushima, but Assassin's Creed Shadows from earlier this year, which is a game I really enjoyed, but has a super belabored, very prolonged opening that I described on the podcast when I played that game, that it was so belabored and so prolonged that they clearly chunked up parts of that opening and put them as flashback optional missions in later in the game because the opening was so long they had to like move it somewhere else. Whereas like Yotei has this like raw fucking confidence to just say, no, we're going to go in. You get the fucking scene where her family dies. That's like 3 minutes. You get a like cool montage of her life leading her to coming back to Ezo. The like tutorial, quote unquote, of the game is you fighting the snake, which is the first of the Yotei 6 she kills. And then that leads directly into you just getting into the open world and starting to go investigate the other ones. And so you are just into it so fast, and it's so cool. And then that leads you into the gameplay stuff where, again, if you played Tsushima, a lot of the gameplay systems and the design of the game will be familiar. It's just all very heavily refined. And so the combat will be very familiar stylistically. The big shift is that they have moved away from stances, and instead you get different weapons that have a bit more variety to the way they play. So instead of you having 4 different stances with the katana, you unlock so far I have the regular katana, which you start with. You get dual katanas very early. And then depending on where you go, you can start unlocking the different weapons in other orders. But I also have the spear. And so those add a bit more variety to the combat than just what the styles used to do. And so the way the combat and the stealth works is all good. It's as good as it was in the last game. I enjoy it a lot. I think it still has the sense of they've designed the combat to give you the feeling of the kinds of fights you see in the samurai movies, and all that stuff is very good. The big improvements with gameplay, though, for me, are more in the game design front, which is they've just gotten even better at the way they design the open world and how they, like, unveil it to the player. Ghost of Tsushima was already far above a lot of its contemporaries in that kind of Ubisoft-style open world game of embedding the open world objectives and activities much more naturally, having them unveil to the player in a much more natural way. You're not climbing up a tower and just getting 50 markers on your map. It's more of that, like you are looking out into the distance and seeing something interesting, like a strange looking tree or a smoke signal somewhere, or you see like a building or a tower off in the distance that's like a watchtower, and you kind of set those as your kind of markers and go exploring and find what's going on there. I think what Ghost of Yōtei does is it chunks up the world in a much smarter way. If you remember Tsushima, the Ghost of Tsushima map was broken into 3 very big chunks, and it was kind of 3/3 of that game, but each chunk was fucking gigantic. It was like a huge, huge game. Ghost of Yōtei, I don't know what the whole scope of the game is yet, because they don't just show you the entire map, but I've played enough to go to the second kind of region. And what they've done is instead of having it be 3 huge thirds of the map is broken up into more discrete regions, but that feel like actual regions. It's still an open world game, but it doesn't feel as like, how to describe this? It kind of feels like a little bit more almost like a Dragon Age Inquisition. Not as far as that, but that kind of open world game where there are like discrete zones that you go to. These zones are still technically connected, but they're connected in like a more cinematic way in the world. And so it's not trying to be full GTA style open world. The entire world is seamless and all that kind of stuff. It's more trying to take advantage of the sense of here are these like important sections of the world of Ezo, and it's really focusing in on those and creating a density to the open world exploration that first game did not quite have, but also a pacing to it, because instead of you spending 20 to 30 hours in this 1/3 of the map, and then you unlock the second third of the map, and it's another 20 to 30 hours of exploring this huge region, it's broken up into like what has felt like a 5 to 8 hour chunk, at least the opening area was. And this next area I'm in feels like it's another maybe 5 to 8 hour chunk that's focused around here is this one bad guy in this region and kind of what his whole deal is and his narrative and all that kind of stuff. And so there's just a focus to it that is kind of marrying a little bit more of what you get from a more linear adventure game, but setting it in your big open world. And I just think they have found, from what I've played so far, a really, really interesting balance of having the exploration, having the open world, letting you get lost in it, but chunking it up in a way that feels like you're much more motivated to keep on going with the main story, and you don't have the problem of my character on my revenge mission has just been wandering the random plains of Japan for 30 hours, and then now I go and do the next main story mission. Maybe that will change later on. I don't know. Again, I'm still in the first 5 to 6 hours of the game, but I've been very impressed at how that open world is designed and organized in a way that feels very different than Tsushima, and different than honestly any other open world game I've played. Like it just feels like they have learned some really great lessons from some of the failings of other open world games, and created something that is just really fantastic. So yeah, I'm having just a great time with it. I strongly recommend, especially if you liked Ghost of Tsushima. I think this is a very easy recommend because I think it's just a better game in every way based on what I've played so far. And even if you didn't love Ghost of Tsushima, this might be a game, depending on what you didn't like about it. I think if you didn't like the open world bloatiness of some of that game and like how much stuff there was to do and how it was organized and it kind of fatigued you, I think that the design of Ghost of Yōtei might appeal to some people more if that was an issue you had with the first game.
That's awesome. I mean, I loved Ghost of Tsushima. It's one of my favorite PS4 exclusives, and I mean, I generally like what Sucker Punch does, so I do want to get to this at some point. I'm not going to get to it right away. I do have to say, though, the thing, more than everything you just said interests me, Sean, but also while you were talking, I looked up the voice cast. Jesus. Once again, their Japanese voice cast is just insanely stacked. The main character is Pharaoh's Eye, who's like a huge younger actor right now. Some of the villains are like people like Jun Fukuyama and Tomokazu Seki. Romy Park is in there. That all, like, because the voice cast in that first game was so legendary, that just makes me very happy to hear.
Yes, and I definitely would recommend playing with the Japanese voice cast. The English voice cast seems good, but it's, you know, it's a game set in Japan. It's one of those things where the writing in Japanese is so good. And I feel like even if you don't understand it, like you can get that sense of there's an authenticity to it of them speaking like period appropriate Japanese, and it's very cool.
Here's a question. In the original release of Ghost of Tsushima on PS4, the lip flaps did not match the Japanese, and they fixed that for the PS5 version. What is it like in Ghost of Yōtei at launch?
Yes, I believe it's fixed.
Okay.
There was one cutscene I saw that it looked a little bit off to me, but I don't know why that. There was only one cutscene where it's like, this is like seems like a little bit weird. But every other cutscene has matched. So I believe that it's like what Ghost of Tsushima was. Once they released that patch.
Yeah. So that's good to know, because it wasn't like a huge problem in the original, but yeah. Also, are you playing it in just normal color? Are you playing in Kurosawa mode? I know there's a Takashi Miike mode. I have no idea what that looks like. Do you have anything on that?
I'm just playing in the regular mode. Like this one feels far less Kurosawa inflected than Tsushima did.
Right.
Like it feels like the movies that it's pulling from stylistically are not black and white movies. They're very colored.
Yeah, what you were describing, I had more like later samurai movies that are in color in my head, just from your description, so it makes sense that you wouldn't play it that way.
Like, it's like, I would definitely, like, a director I would go to is like Hideo Gosha in some of his like later movies, where there's like that bit more violence. It's just has that kind of vibe. But like, I've toggled it on and off while I was exploring it. It's still very cool. It's something that maybe for a second playthrough I do. The Miike mode you're talking about, that is not as dramatic a visual overhaul. That is like a more modifier for the combat, where it makes the combat more kind of like brutal. I think it brings the camera in tighter, but it makes so like there's more like, where there's like when you're doing the combat and you defeat an enemy, there are like little finisher animations that happen whenever you defeat an enemy. And some of them can include like dismembering an arm or something like that. I believe that mode like increases the likeliness of some of the more violent things happen to capture some of the more violent attitude in his films.
Takashi Miike mode could mean a lot of things.
Yes.
Let's just be clear, based on his very large, very weird filmography. So that made me laugh when I saw that.
Yes. I've mostly just playing in the regular mode on hard difficulty. And I turned the HUD to quote unquote expert mode, which is how I played Tsushima, which just kind of like gets rid of like the enemy health bars and some of that extra stuff, which I just think the whole vibe of that game is so cool that you kind of want a lot of that stuff out of your way. And so that's
how I played Tsushima too. Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds great. And I mean, the two games actually we're talking about here are kind of similar in that they're sequels to games from 2020 that are not like complete overhauls, but seem like very refined. So the one I'm talking about is Hades 2. Hades 2 had been in early access for several years, the same way Supergiant had done with Hades 1, but now we have the full version of the game, and it also has a Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 release. I'm playing it on Nintendo Switch 2. That version of the game is super impressive. It's the most like graphically advanced a new Switch game has basically ever been, because the game plays in like high resolution. It looks really good, but also it's full native 120 FPS on the TV. On handheld, I think it's limited to 60, but I've mostly been playing it on the TV. And so it is just cool to play. Like, I know Hades is not as graphically demanding as some other games, but it is just cool to buy a brand new game on my Switch and have it in basically the best possible quality. So that's been neat. And yeah, if for those who don't remember, I absolutely adored Hades 1. That came out in 2020. It was my game of the year for 2020. It would be, for me, very contentious with something like Elden Ring for game of the decade so far. I absolutely adore the original Hades. And Hades 2 is stupendous. It's honestly... It took me aback. It continues to take me aback a little bit how good this game is and how much it recaptures while also evolving what made the original game so spectacularly great. Because, you know, for those who don't remember, Hades is a roguelike. It's a roguelike that adds quite a bit of narrative scaffolding and progression mechanics onto your basic roguelike structure of having the same basic game to play through over and over again and try to get further every time. And the way Hades did that was so masterful, but also it felt so confident and full unto itself that I think when it was first announced, Hades 2 kind of confused a lot of people. Like, what do you mean a Hades 2? Like, what is a sequel to a Hades? And the way they've answered that question is really interesting. Like, so I am 15 hours into it so far. I've played, I think, 35 runs, and on my 34th run, I did beat the main boss, which is Kronos, for the first time. But as people who've played Hades before, and basically any roguelike know, the first time you actually beat the game is kind of the beginning of your actual path with the ultimate engagement of the game. And what's interesting to me so far is that this game feels both much faster paced than Hades 1 in some ways, and more of a slow burn in other ways. So let me explain what I mean by that. Part of that is that you get through the game faster. Like, Hades 1 probably took me and most people more runs and definitely more time to get to the point where you beat that game's final boss, which is Hades himself. And that was probably like more of a 30-hour thing. And I got to the end of Hades 2, its main boss, much quicker. So in that way, it does feel faster. You unlock things more quickly. A lot of the stuff that were like more late game additions that you would find, like extra what they call death defiances, which is where you can basically get a second life in the game, or a lot of the different abilities and the way they kind of scaffold things on. Stuff that in Hades 1 you would have gotten into later come in much earlier in Hades 2, and the game very much relies on your knowledge of the metagame of Hades 1 to know kind of how to play Hades 2. So all the weapons, a lot of the things you get, a lot of the character relationships, you just move through that stuff a lot faster, and it knows you're going to move through it faster. And one of the ways it accounts for all of this is that it is actually two roguelike games rolled into one. When you play the game, at first you have your main path, which is I'll talk about the characters and everything in a second, but you're going down, you're trying to get into Tartarus, which is where Hades is and where Kronos has taken over. And so that is kind of the main game where you're going down into Tartarus, and there's 4 basically stages, the same way there was in Hades 1, and it's procedurally generated the different levels within those stages, all of that stuff. But after a few hours, you also unlock a mode where you are going up, and it is a completely separate 4-stage roguelike adventure going up to Mount Olympus. And so it is literally twice the size of Hades 1. You have two full, and neither one is like bigger than the other. In fact, the one where you're going up is harder than the one where you're going down. And so it is 2 full roguelike experiences in one. So it is twice as big a game. And part of how it moves faster is that and the way it's able to iterate on Hades 1, because like just knowledge of the metagame and how you play a roguelike is so much of what mastering a roguelike is. Making a sequel, I think, as Supergiant shows, kind of necessitates having more content and more ways to engage with it to really feel like it is a new experience. And so all of that makes the game feel very fast in a really interesting way of how fast you're getting through and unlocking and seeing new things. But I also think it is more of a slow burn narratively in an interesting way, because the story Hades 1 told was one that is very tied into the whole idea of what a roguelike is. For those who don't remember, Hades 1 is about a character Zagreus, who is Hades and Persephone's son, and he has decided he wants to get out of the underworld. Specifically, he wants to go to the surface to try to meet his mother, because she and Hades are separated in the lore and all this stuff. And so he is trying to get out of Tartarus, get up to the surface. And as you play that game, it is about, and like literally Sisyphus is a character in the game, and so it is about this Sisyphean struggle of doing something over and over again without being able to succeed. And that ultimately becomes the full text of the game, because once you beat Hades in Hades 1, Zagreus realizes that he cannot survive on the surface because of how the fates deemed his side of the family. He is only allowed in the underworld, and so he can get to the surface, but only for a couple minutes, and then he is sent back down. And ultimately that game is about Zagreus accepting his situation in the world and making the best of it as he could, and going through these runs up to the surface, not to ultimately escape Tartarus, but to reconcile with his family, with his mother, with his father, with the gods, and make a better life than he had before. And that story is like so well suited to the kind of game Hades is, that's part of what made it such a masterpiece. But then when you're making a sequel, you can't just tell the same story again. You can't have Zagreus or someone else who just wants to get out. You can't have a story that is about that dawning realization of the Sisyphean struggle. You have to do something different. So Hades 2 opens, and you kind of have to piece the narrative together over the first couple of runs, because it just drops you into the middle of the action. And now you are playing as Melinoe, who is Zagreus' little sister, Hades and Persephone's second daughter. She did not exist at the time of Hades 1, so somewhere in the, godlike time scale, this is later on. And what has happened is, after Melinoe was born, the Titan Kronos, who is her grandfather and Hades' father, reawakened. He had been defeated by the gods, eons earlier, but now he is back, and he has taken over the underworld. He has kidnapped Hades. We're not sure what has happened to Zagreus and Persephone and some of the others. He is also invading the surface up on Mount Olympus, and Melinoe has spent her entire life in a sort of in-between state between the underworld and the overworld, where she is being taught by Hecate, and Hecate, the witch, is like basically teaching her what she needs to do to go down to Tartarus and defeat Kronos. So Melinoe 1 is much more like trained in what she has to do than Zagreus was. She is a magician, so her powers in the game are quite a bit different. Zagreus is much more of a brawler who gets up close and personal with everybody. Melinoe has a lot of effects that are more like magic-based, area of effect-based. She has a cast system that's very different. She has a magic bar, which Zagreus did not have. But also in the story, her purpose is very different, because she has been raised since birth to do this one thing, which is go down and defeat Kronos. And so I've only just beaten Kronos for the first time, but the story also unfolds in some ways more slowly, because Melinoe has more purpose at the beginning, but then how is this all going to unfold, and all the pieces go into place, and what is going up at Mount Olympus, and how is Melinoe going to reunite with her family? Where are we going to start seeing characters from the first Hades? All of that stuff I feel like plays out more slowly than Hades 1, because it is a more complicated story this time around to justify the sort of roguelike setting and everything. But all of it is great. Supergiant are as good as anyone in the business at what they do. Their games are so just ludicrously confident in what they are. Hades 2, and I think part of this is because of how they do their early access stuff. When you start playing Hades 2, it is so polished. It is so confident at what it does. There is not anything out of place in this game. The amount of writing and voice acting that goes on, the amount of areas you can go to, and all the character portraits and all of that stuff, the narrative scaffolding around the game that was such a pleasure in Hades 1, I feel like they've upped the ante on all of that. It's ludicrous just how many characters and how many unique interactions you have with them. It feels bottomless. I have not seen a repeated piece of dialogue yet. Everywhere you go, everyone you talk to, it's new all the time. There's so many people to interact with and things to do in sort of your main hub area, but then also as you're going through the world, there are so many cool pieces of random encounter design that will change things up and will, flesh out your relationship with different people. And all of that is every bit as good as it was in Hades 1. And if anything, I feel like that game has emboldened them to be even bolder with their art style, more varied in kind of, because all of Hades basically looks like hand-drawn art and backgrounds, and it's really cool and really detailed, and the environments are really great. And then the character portraits this time around, which are still basically still, but have some pieces of moving animation and effects on them, just look cool as shit. So all of that is awesome. And then the gameplay is so stupendous. Like both of the new roguelike paths that you have down to Tartarus or up to Mount Olympus, they are fantastic. I don't know if either one of them on their own is quite as like good and rich as the single path in Hades 1, but it is also doing something different. And in both directions, they switch up the formula in some interesting ways. So like the third area of the Tartarus path has you getting, instead of you go through individual rooms where you defeat the enemies, you get one boon is what they call it, which is the thing, like your new power up from the gods, and then you move on to the next room. The first two areas of the Tartarus path are like that, but the third moves into it's the morning fields you're on. And so it's these big open environments where you have to go around and find 2 or 3 boons before you move on to the next encounter, and they each add more enemies to the map. And so they find really fun ways to do that. The upper route completely changes the sort of formula in a lot of ways. Like you start in the city of Afira, and you're going through and you have to like pick your route between and get 6 different rooms together before you move on, but you can go in whatever order you want. So a lot of that is really cool. And then the combat is just so fantastic. The way they've distinguished Melinoe from Zagreus is really interesting and right away, like, really involving. Like, she's a really cool character who has quite a bit more in terms of combat options and ways to build the character than Zagreus did. It's a much more complicated version of these systems, in part because she has 6 full weapons you ultimately unlock. Each of those weapons changes the game completely, and then all of those weapons has up to 3 different sub-versions of the weapon, and I haven't even gotten into all of those. So there's like really kind of 18 distinct ways to approach things, and then the way Melinoe plays more with, again, magic. She's a little more at a distance from the enemies. There's obviously all sorts of new types of enemies that they add into the game. It is like a really interesting balance between... It is iterative on what Hades 1 did. If you played Hades 1, you know the basics of what Hades 2 is, but it also like blows up and expands what that base Hades 1 experience was in so many different directions, with a story that also feels like it is about exploding and exploring your explorations of things, that it is a complete package. Like, Hades 1 was a very easy game of the year for me in 2020. Hades 2 is immediately my game of the year right now. We'll see if there's another game. There's a lot left to come. There's a new Metroid. There's a new Digimon. There's lots for me to play. But Hades 2 is like pretty head and shoulders above anything else I've played this year. It's just fucking outstanding.
I mean, it sounds very good. I'm excited for the top 10 where it's going to be your number one, and then in the middle of the discussion, you're like, actually, wait, no, it's Digimon Story Time Stranger. I'm a madman. It has to be Digimon Story Time Stranger, and that goes up to your number one. But yes, I mean, this game seems awesome. It's cool the way that Supergiant has managed to make the like early access model work for them in a way that I think it just has never worked for other developers to this level, and they've now done it twice with the same franchise. Because both times, you know, I had this sort of suspicion of like, well, are they gonna kind of like use up the enthusiasm for this game in its early access period, and then will there not be that same level of enthusiasm once the actual game releases? And I wondered that for Hades, and that obviously ended up not being the case. And then for Hades 2, I'm like, well, I wonder if people will be like, they got their fill of, because it's a sequel, they've already played one whole game with this style. Will they kind of use up that enthusiasm again for something that wasn't brand new on the early access period? But nope, once again, it just seems like they've made such a good game. As you said, they've expanded on it in such key ways. I'm very curious to hear about like what that Olympus route entails in terms of, like, do you know, is it Kronos again at the top of that, or is there a different final boss? Like, I'm just kind of curious about that side of things.
Yeah, so I have not gotten to the top of the Olympus route. I do think it's something different is going on up there. Like, you're specifically going up there to try to help the Olympians with, like, this overrun of Mount Olympus. I have gotten to the 3rd stage, which is Mount Olympus itself, and is a incredibly cool area as you're going up this mountain, but it's also like the hardest area in the game so far, so I have not gotten through that just yet, and I kind of wound up focusing on the bottom route, because before we talked about it on the podcast, I wanted to be able to say I'd beaten Kronos, and I could, like, because also in this kind of game, once you get to that point and you know you can do it, you feel so empowered to go on and do all sorts of things. But yeah, I am excited to see that, and like, if you are, as with Hades 1, if you like Greek mythology even casually, it is such a fun version of it, because everything in it is taken from the myths in one way or another, but it is such a characteristic, fun spin on all of that stuff. And it is so in, like, Supergiant has made these myths their own in their own sort of fun way, and this is such a cool extension of that. Like, there are new characters you get here, like Odysseus is someone who is in your area, and he is basically leading all the other ghosts, the Shades, because he is like a noble, human hero. And you get a lot of, like, the other children of Nyx. The Fates are major characters in this one, although so far where they are in the world, there's like a question, and I'm excited to see where that goes. Obviously, you still have all of your romances, so if there's someone you want to get down and dirty with, that is part of this game too, because this game is not as horny as Hades 1 was so far, but it is still pretty horny, and all of that is great. So yeah, it's definitely like, it's the kind of game that, as with Hades 1, has made me want to, like, dust off my copy of the Odyssey and go read that again, get some other just prime, Greek myth into my veins.
Yeah, because I guess, like, for me, like, a big question is, like, what the fuck is Zeus doing? I mean, like, come on, man. You're Zeus. Like, your number one job is to, keep this Mount Olympus shit locked down tight. Like, you beat fucking Kronos once, man. Like, come on.
Well, he beat him with several other gods in tow, and apparently right now he cannot get down into... There's, like, reasons for all of this, but he is up on Mount Olympus. They've been holding everyone at bay. You're going up to help. But Melinoe's job is getting rid of Kronos down in the depths, and we'll see how it all goes. Because this game also, the stakes it establishes are much more external than Zagreus's, where Zagreus's stakes were purely internal. He wanted to get out of Hades, but the world was fine. In this case, the world is so fucked up that I'm really curious how they kind of create an ending for this game. Because the ending for Hades 1 is that Hades 1 continues indefinitely because you come to accept the cycle. That can't quite be the ending for Hades 2, otherwise it would be very disappointing. So I'm very curious where they go with it.
Maybe it's just fucking Kratos from God of War. Maybe he's up in the latest. It's like the thing you don't realize is that Hades 2 is happening at the same time as God of War 3, and Kratos is just fucking murdering everybody up there. And Melinoe gets up there and is like, what the fucking fuck? And there's like, Hermes' just severed head with his eyes fucking plucked out over in the corner. Hercules has been gutted. Hera's neck is broken. It's just like, shit, Jesus Christ, what's going on?
That would be an amazing reveal if you get to the top of Mount Olympus and the final boss of the game is just Kratos, and they just licensed him from Sony, and it's the same voice and everything. Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah. Hello, girl.
Yes. Although it would be sad because the gods are such fun characters in this. Seeing them all dead would be a real bummer. And there's other, like, characters from the myths who come in. Like, there are different people you can find throughout the game that, like, help you. Like, Arachne, the spider, will, like, give you different, like, pieces of clothing that will help you. My favorite one, maybe because it's just so funny, is you meet Narcissus, and he is just talking about himself the whole time. He thinks you have a crush on him, even though you think he's really lame. One of the bosses is the Sirens from the Odyssey, and they are basically playing in a band, and there's three of them. There's a singer, there's a guitar player, and a drummer, and you defeat them all sort of separately and individually, and when you knock one of them out, their instrument drops out. And so it's a song that they are singing through the boss fight, and you can know how well you're doing because different pieces of instrumentation will disappear, and they have several different songs they'll play depending on when you come to them. This game is, it's so over the top, and I fucking love it.
Seems very, very good.
All right, what else have you been playing, Sean?
Well, I've been playing a few things. Let me talk about the thing that I'm always playing and will never not be playing, which is Genshin Impact. It's our Genshin Impact update because Genshin Impact has hit 6.0. It's the time of the year where it's the 5th year anniversary for Genshin Impact. Was, I think, just last week is when the anniversary passed. So Genshin Impact is now in a new region. And something pretty interesting has happened with this one where, the original kind of like plan or roadmap or whatever for the journey through the game was that you start in the region of Mondstadt, you then go to Liyue, you then go to Inazuma, Sumeru, Fontaine, Natlan, and then the seventh and final nation would be Snezhnaya, which is their kind of Russia-themed one that is, very heavily wrapped up in the story because one of the main antagonistic factions, the Fadui, are from there. We have yet to have met the Cryo goddess, who is the Tsarista of Snezhnaya and all this stuff. But they announced a while ago that Snezhnaya was not actually going to be the next nation after Natlan, that we're going to a different place, which is a place called Nod Cry. which is a kind of like border region between Natlan and the next region, Snezhnaya. And at first I had very complicated feelings about like, because I was very excited to go to finally go to Snezhnaya and see what the cryo goddess was like and all that kind of stuff. But it became clear the reason why you're in Nod Cry, and so far with 6.0, the story has been really, really awesome, is because there's a lot of threads of story things that have happened over the years in Genshin Impact that like need to kind of be addressed, it feels like, before you go to Snezhnaya. There's just a lot of characters who have been teased, a lot of like little things in the lore and stuff that it feels like they need to kind of get tidy before they move to the next phase of the story. And so Nodcry is kind of a region designed to do that because it is this lawless region that is vaguely based sort of on Ireland. Like it's got this kind of vague Celtic vibe, but there are all these different factions that have kind of come here in this place, and there's no kind of reigning government. There's no goddess of this region, technically. There is the moon goddess, should be in control of this region, but she is like the MIA basically, and there's narrative reasons for why. And so you have all these different kind of factions, like the Fadui, you have the native people living here, or this kind of druidic Celtic kind of people, and these kind of wanderers who have just washed up in this place that is just kind of this whole weird home for people who don't quite fit anywhere else in the world of Teyvat in Genshin Impact. And that is their kind of like way to get slowly. There's all these other characters we know that are like here or going to come here that are important characters in the story, like Varka, who is the leader of the Knights of Favonius, who is a character who has been teased since the launch of the game, because the first faction you meet are the Knights of Favonius of Mondstadt, who are led by Jean, who is the acting commander, because their actual commander is on some excursion, and you have never seen him until he is here, and he has been here for years. And so that character's here. We know that Alice, who is Clay's mother, is going to be here, and she's a witch that is like deeply wrapped up in the lore of Genshin Impact. There's multiple members of the Fadui Harbingers are here that we have yet to meet, that they kind of need to wrap up. There's an antagonist in this region who's tied into a whole group of characters that are the 5 sinners of Conria, that we had only met 3 of them. And so it's like, well, if it's like there's just like a lot of little things like this where they needed a place to kind of start bringing some of these other stories together that there just wasn't space for in other places. And I think like the way they've done that with Nodcry is actually really cool, because it has just created a region that feels very different, because the structure of Genshin Impact has kind of just evolved at this point. And so the narrative structure of this region has evolved with it, where you don't have the same kind of, oh, we come in, we need to find the goddess of this region, we meet, or the god/goddess, we meet them, there's some sort of like crisis that occurs. Like the sort of structure of the regular update of a Genshin Impact is kind of different here, because everything in Nodcry is much more mysterious. It's much more about these different factions of people kind of vying for power and control of this region that has nobody actually in control of it. And the Traveler comes upon this situation. Partially the reason why the Traveler's here is also because this is where they originally landed when they came to Teyvat. And so there is like stuff here connected to their history when they originally arrived with their twin that also is wrapped up. So there's just, it feels like the region of Nodcry is less like every other Genshin Impact region, where the narrative has kind of been its own pseudo standalone episodic story that contributes to the larger tapestry of the narrative of Genshin Impact. And the Nodcry story so far feels a little bit closer to the kind of intermediate chapters with various characters that have felt more like they're following that central plot line of the Traveler and their history and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the A plot of Genshin Impact. Nodcry feels like it is kind of like fusing those two different things together in a way that narratively is very, very satisfying. Obviously, with it just being the 6.0 update, the only sections of the story we have for this region are kind of the introduction, but it sets up the antagonist for this region. It sets up all the factions in this region in a way that's very, very enticing, that I'm very excited to kind of see where all that goes. One of the other big changes they've made is to kind of the way that the open world exploration works, where there are a couple of sort of old mechanics in Genshin Impact that have been sort of like there, but they haven't really done much with, that they've come up with like a really clever way of kind of combining some of these things together. So there was a reputation system that Genshin Impact has had since it launched, where when you get to a new region, you complete these kind of like cookie cutter bounty missions that are just like, go to this area in the world and defeat this enemy that we've spawned for you. And you can do a couple of those a week, and that would get your reputation up. And that reputation gives you a couple of rewards for that faction, like it will give you like a different skin for your hang glider wings and stuff like that. The big thing it got you was a quote-unquote treasure compass that was an item you could use in the open world to help point you to different points of interest in the open world that otherwise would not be on your map. And that's just how Genshin Impact worked for a very long time. It was kind of a crusty system at this point. Nodcry has totally changed all of that, where instead you have a reputation system is tied directly to each faction, and each faction is in a different region of the map. As you explore that region and complete missions associated with that area and that with that faction, you then get reputation points for that faction specifically. That then gives you some of those items like the treasure compass, but now the treasure compass evolves and becomes better as you complete more. So basically, like as you explore the region, your ability to sort of create points of interest on the map for you to go investigate becomes better and better until eventually you get to 80% explored for that region. And then when you use the treasure compass, it just populates all the remaining points of interest on your map, so you can just go clean it up. And it's a really, really smart system that allows you to have a lot of great exploration, makes it feel like you exploring contributes to your ability to explore better, rather than you having to just do these bounty missions every week and feeling like you just hit this roadblock where you can't get the treasure compass until like a month into the update. And it just gets a little bit tedious that way. Here, like if you want to just go headfirst into exploring, as you explore, your treasure compass evolves until eventually you get to the point where you found like all the stuff you're reasonably going to find on your own. And then that last little extra bit of things that you've kind of glossed over, didn't notice, the treasure compass just helps you find those immediately, and you can go kind of wrap up those last couple of things. It's a very smooth update that, like, there's a lot of little things like that in 6.0 where it just feels like they've looked at things that is the way that Genshin Impact has worked since the beginning, and kind of just found ways to bring those systems together in a way that feels very smart. And it's just kind of evolved all that stuff in very subtle ways that's made this one of the most fun areas to explore, since like some of the like extra areas they've added that are always kind of the most fun ones that are the really dense focused areas. Nodcry kind of feels like it's living in that tradition and kind of evolving it in different ways. That's very cool. The other thing that's big about this update, as with any Genshin Impact update, is the characters, because the characters are fucking awesome. And this time around, if you're a fan of Japanese voice actors, they have gotten a like absolutely ridiculous set of voice actors. That's also very intentional because they're all actors from a very specific generation. It's my favorite generation of voice actors. So you have Varka is voiced by Sugita Tomokazu, who you'd know as Kyon from Haruhi. There's another character, Flynn's, who just got added, who's my favorite new character so far. He's voiced by Nakamura Yuichi. And so there's a very intentional pairing those two characters up. But Flynn's is great. He is a, like, how do you explain this character? He feels like a character from the Addams Family in terms of his attitude. He's this very, like, morbid character who's dressed, like, kind of all in black. He's very pale. He has these very kind of, like dimly lit eyes, and he just talks in this super monotone voice with like Nakamura Yuichi's great, really deep voice. And he keeps on making all these kind of like very morbid jokes without meaning to, because he lives in a fucking cemetery, because he's a character called a Lightkeeper who fights the Wild Hunt, which is like an antagonistic faction in this region of like basically demons. It's an easy way to think of it. This is obviously the Wild Hunt's pulled from Celtic folklore. And so he's just kind of lives this very solitary life in a fucking cemetery. He also happens to be a like lamp fairy. So he's like he's a member of the Fae folk. He's like a supernatural creature basically who doesn't understand human way of thinking. And so he just is this very weird, dark, morbid character. It's a very funny performance from Nakamura Yuichi. You have Lauma, who is this kind of druid priestess character voiced by Kawashima Hoko. You've got Nefer, who is this kind of information broker who kind of is in the middle of all the factions and kind of plays the factions off each other for her own profit. She's voiced by Mizuki Nana. There's just like, it's just a crazy who's who of like really big voice actors who got big in the mid 2000s in voice acting, playing all these different characters. And it's a very fun set of casting for very, very interesting characters, especially because all the characters are so different from each other, rather than a regular Genshin Impact update where it's let's fill out the cast of this region of people from this place. It's like, here's all these people from different places in the world. Flynn's is from up north. He's originally from Snezhnaya. Lauma is a character who's like native to here, but Nefer is from Sumeru, and she looks like a Sumeru character. So there's just this sense of this is a place where all these different people from around the world of Teyvat have kind of washed up in this one weird region of Nod Krai that's kind of cobbled together. It's a totally lawless region. It's very funny that you get a little scene with Yanfei, who's a Liyue character, who's a lawyer, who is here studying for a book. You get a little moment where you talk to her in this realization of like, if you needed, where she's like, well, what happens if you need to arrest somebody? It's like, you don't arrest anybody. You don't arrest someone. Like, that's not a concept that exists in this area. There's no police force. If someone stole your shit, you get your shit back. Like, that's how it works. There's no law here. There's no cops. There's none of that. There's no court of law. And so there's like the way that the region is set up is just very interesting. So I'm having a lot of fun still with Genshin Impact. And it has been a very cool update because it just has a very, very different vibe than any of the other Genshin Impact updates. But it feels like, especially after Natlan, which I really liked a lot, but it felt like we were in need of like a mix up with the way that these updates worked. I think that the Nod Cry 6.0 update has been very canny and is like the right update at the right time to make Genshin Impact feel really fresh again. So, great game. People should play it.
Yeah,
I'm playing it. It's great.
I fell off Genshin after Sumeru, so I hadn't followed it in a while. So it's always fun to hear what's going on in the game. And yeah, man, having both Nakamoto Yuichi and Tomokazu Seki, what a coup. That's great.
Yeah, it's just a who's who of great voice actors.
All right. What else did you have, Sean?
The other big thing I have is Super Robot Wars Y, which...
Yeah, I want to hear about this. This sounds fun.
Which I need to find some way to play while I'm also playing Ghost of Yōtei and wanting to play Digimon Storytime Stranger, because I'm certainly not done with it. I'm like 30 hours into Super Robot Wars Y. I've been playing it for like 3 weeks or something at this point. It is a very, very fun game. This is my first Super Robot Wars game, so like I cannot compare. My sense is that the Super Robot Wars community likes this game. My sense was they didn't like the Super Robot Wars 30 all that much, but I'm not, again, this is my first one of these games, so I cannot speak to that community or any of that, and all my impressions of it are probably, if you're someone who's played a bunch of Super Robot Wars games, you're like, well, yeah, of course, that's what all these games are. I don't know what all these games are. This is the first one I played. I'm having a huge amount of fun with it. For people who don't know, like me, who have not played one of these games before, it is basically a franchise where you take a bunch of different mecha series. I know it's called Super Robot Wars, but technically it is also real robots are thoroughly represented as well. But it's like various things from all across the decades of mecha franchises, kind of all thrown together into this one turn-based tactics game. With a like crazy fucking story that it mixes all these characters and all this shit together into one big kind of melting pot, and kind of you see what comes out of it. And so Super Robot Wars Y, I'm not going to say every single franchise that's here because there's a lot. There's obviously a lot of Gundam stuff. So there's Char's Counterattack is represented. Zeta Gundam is represented, though it's kind of confusing because the Zeta Gundam stuff exists in the same timeline as the Char's Counterattack stuff. So there's like a Camille. If like Camille joins Char after the events of Char's Counterattack is the Camille in this game, it's, some of that shit gets a little bit confusing if you're trying to be too strict to what is and is not quote unquote Zeta Gundam as per the rules of the game is a confusing question to answer. Mobile Fighter G Gundam is here, Gundam Wing is here, but it's the Endless Waltz version of Gundam Wing, which is good because that's the coolest version of the Gundam Wing Zero. So you get a bunch of that Gundam stuff. Gundam Seed Destiny. It's specifically Gundam Seed Destiny. It's not Gundam Seed. It's not Gundam Seed Freedom. It's Gundam Seed Destiny. It's very particular about like where and what it's pulling from. So that's like some of the Gundam stuff. You've got Aura Battler Dunbine is here. You've got Heavy Metal Elgime, and that's been some of the most fun stuff about this game for me, is we have not yet watched those shows for our Tomino-thon, but we're going to get to them. And so getting to see the characters in the mecha from that franchise and the fucking theme songs, which are fucking cool, and just getting those, it makes me very, very excited to get to those series. And so that's some of that stuff. You also have a bunch of really old series. So you've got Combatler V and you've got Brave Raideen from the 70s, which we did not watch Brave Raideen for the Tomino-thon, but half of that show was directed by Tomino. But that's here. You also have much more modern stuff. So you've got Macross Delta, which is the most recent Macross series is in this, SSS Dyna Xenon, which is a super robot show that's kind of the pseudo sequel to Gridman. That's in this game. The fucking Godzilla Singular Point is in here. So you get Jet Jaguar from Godzilla Singular Point, which is hilarious because Jet Jaguar from that anime, which is like an anime version of Godzilla that's its whole own continuity. Jet Jaguar in that is like a little AI controlled robot guy who's maybe like 10 feet tall. And so it's very, very funny because he looks so tiny when you get the animations of them fighting and everything else is fucking gigantic. And there's this little tiny Jet Jaguar with a little spear made out of a bone from Anguirus he fucking stabs shit with. But point being, you have a whole crazy range of different characters from wildly different series, some of which are there fighting fucking demons like Getter Robo Arc and like Insectors from other dimensions. Some of them are from series where you're fighting other humans. And it's just a huge fucking grab bag of all these crazy different series thrown together. And so when you're playing the game, it's really kind of mind-blowing the way in which they throw all these together narratively. So there's like a sort of a unique setting they've made. And from what I understand, this is just for this game. I don't think this is like all the Super Robot Wars games or other Super Robot Wars games have the setting. I might be wrong about that, but I believe this is just like, this is the backstory for this version, for this game. And it's basically set in this world where there is a giant revolutionary war that encompassed both, like, most of the events of Universal Century Gundam through Char's Counterattack. It includes the events of Code Geass. It includes the events of Gundam Wing. It includes the events of Mobile Fighter G Gundam. And that was like this giant war that basically like all the series that were about wars between humans, all of those were one war, and it was all one giant war with just like, I guess, 1,000 different fronts with all these different crazy things happening. And then also there were just random other alien invasions and shit that were happening that have happened in the past. That the other factions that have fought aliens like Combattler V were like, yeah, and then there was when the Campbellians invaded and we had to fight them. And it's like, you know, this must have been a very fucking nutty ass war. But basically the events of Code Geass happen at the end of Code Geass with how the conflict in that story resolves is how that war ends in this fiction. And you're living in this world post this giant war where there's an original character you play as who's like the part of this kind of elite ninja faction that's kind of been working multiple sides. And you're kind of teaming up with this group of people who have this giant sort of fortress ship called the A Advent. And you're going around this kind of world after the end of this giant war, trying to piece things together, but also prevent a new conflict that seems to be burgeoning and happening again. And in the course of that, you come and encounter all the major characters from all these other series, and eventually you get them to join your team, and they all keep on coming on board. And at this point, I think I have maybe something like 30 to 40 different units. Like, it's crazy. You can only field 15 people at a time, which at a certain point gets stressful because it's like because it's not like you just get like, here's Camille and he's my Zedam Gundam guy, and here's Amuro, he's my Char's Counterattack guy. Like, some of them you get like 10 people, like you get the whole team from fucking Macross Delta. You get like, just from Zeta Gundam, you have Camille's in it, Emma Sheen is in it, who she's alive in this continuity. But it's not the movie continuity, but it is the TV show continuity, but somehow Emma's still alive. Fa, Yuri is in this, and she's here with the Methus, her mobile suit, and shit. So you get all of them are just from Zeta Gundam. There's just like a crazy number of different characters. All the Gundam Wing boys are in it. From fucking Mobile Fighter G Gundam, you have Domon, Sai Saishi, the Russian guy whose name I'm blanking on. You get Chibity Crockett, the American fighter. You get George Desand, the French fighter. You get fucking Alan B. Beardsley in the Noble Gundam, the Sailor Moon-looking Gundam. Anne Rain, the girlfriend, Domon's girlfriend, who's in the fucking Rising Gundam, is in this playable as well.
That's so funny.
Like, so that, just to give a sense of, like, it's not just Domon. Here's like 7 or 8 characters from G Gundam. So it's a crazy number of characters. When you're doing your missions, you have, like, before the fighting, you have these, like, visual novel style scenes that are non-voice acted because it would be the most expensive voice acting budget in the history of video games if those scenes were fucking voice acted. The characters are voice acted in the combat. They are not voice acted in the narrative scenes, and that is perfectly fine because it would... I think your expectations would be unreasonable if you wanted those to be voice acted. But they do have these visual novel style cutscenes where you just have all these characters together. And honestly, they're quite good at capturing the voice of the characters. Like, it took a while for me to get into it because I was just so disoriented by trying to wrap my mind around the setting of the game, especially as someone who's seen maybe about a little bit more than a third of the stuff in the game. I've obviously seen all the Gundam stuff. There are a couple other pieces I've seen. Witch from Mercury's in it as well. I knew there's one Gundam I was forgetting, Witch from Mercury, but just season 1 of Witch from Mercury, not the season 2 stuff, because I think the game was in development before that would have been possible. But so I've seen like a good chunk of it, but there's a lot of stuff in this game I have not seen, like Dunbind, like Elgheim. I've not seen this Macross show. I've not seen the 2 old Super Robot shows. I've not seen fucking, was it like Majin Kaiser versus the Great General of Darkness, which I don't even know which version of that movie is the one from this game, because I tried to look it up and there's multiple things called Majin Kaiser versus the Great General of Darkness. I don't know which one is the one from the game. Like, even with the amount of mecha stuff I've seen, there's a lot of stuff in the game that I'm at like a deep level of ignorance on. And so trying to wrap my head around the setting until eventually I kind of like let it go and is like, I just can't think about that. Once I got into the game that way, I started to really, really enjoy the story, probably about like 8 hours in. Just the way the characters are written, the kind of crazy scenarios they come up with, the ways in which they recreate scenes from the like original shows, but they put in other characters, like having Hiro Yui, the main character of Gundam Wing, inserted into the events of the first episode of fucking Witch from Mercury is pretty wild, and him being this all like spectator to Soleda's fight, and he's looking at the fucking Gundam Ariel, and he's thinking, like, reflecting on the natures of the Gundam and all this shit, and what the Zero system is predicting about the future. It's just pretty wild seeing all these things intersect. And then I started to just really embrace the joy of getting these weird glimpses into shows I've just never seen and know almost nothing about. And there's like these crazy characters you see and the crazy settings they talk about. And it makes you like really excited to see whatever random shows they are from, even when I look it up and the shows have terrible reviews. Like, there's this one thing that I had never heard about in the game called Majestic Prince, which has the character designer from Gundam Seed. So at first I thought there was like a weird Gundam Seed spinoff I didn't know about, but it's a different thing. And that series had very poor reviews based on what I saw online. But at some point I really want to watch it because the characters are fucking nuts and the series just seems absolutely fucking crazy. I'm like, I have to know what this is from, and I need to like see these stories. And it's cool just seeing the mix of some shows. They're like kind of pulling the characters are from after the events of that series. Particularly the older stuff, like all the Gundam shows that have been in like 100 of these games. It's all like Domon after the events of Mobile Fighter G Gundam, which is a cool kind of way to write that character. And then that's interspersed with, here is Soleta from the beginning of Witch from Mercury, and you see her growing as a character alongside all these kind of wacky new friends that she has. It's very fun, and there's just all these just insane moments you run into. Like, my favorite moment is once you do get Witch from Mercury, you also get Choo Terry Pan Lunch, the greatest character in the history of Gundam, and seeing her in the same room as fucking the Gundam Wing boys and shit like that is just very great. It's so fucking good. It's just crazy. And then you get into the strategy game stuff, and the strategy game is not like the deepest thing in the world. Like, if you're... And again, I'm saying this as someone who's not played other of these games. I put it on the normal difficulty, not the hard difficulty. So that is my frame of reference. If you're someone who's like wants a like really like deep level turn-based tactical strategy game thing, this doesn't feel super deep based on what I have played of it. Like, I feel like I don't need to have a particularly thorough understanding of a lot of the mechanics to be able to just kind of win my way through fights. Again, at least on the normal difficulty. But there is enough that, like, especially at the point I'm at in the game, like, I am using, like, kind of the full range of tools where characters have, like, special abilities and stuff like that you use that give you special effects. You have support characters that have their own kind of, like, unit of kind of resources that you have to spend and stuff like that. There's a difference between you have multiple battleships that you can use, and they can kind of give support to your units that are in the field. There's a lot of complexity in how you level up characters because pilots and machines, like mechas, have two different levels. And so the pilot and the mecha level up differently. And you can put different pilots and different mechas as long as they're from the same series. So if you like really desperately wanted to, you could put Fa in the fucking Zeta Gundam and just say, go for it, Fa, like, like have fun. You can't use any of the new type moves, but you could fuck people up with a giant fucking laser gun and put Camille in the Methus and have him run around with a fucking pistol. So there's like I'm sure there's like a lot of crazy synergy you can create in how you level up and develop your team, and that feels like a lot of where the strategy is. But the fun of the gameplay is more just the spectacle of it and the madness of throwing all these units together and seeing the crazy special moves. The graphics are really, really cool looking. If you've ever seen these games, you know that they kind of trade on having really crazy big spectacle ultimate attacks and stuff like that. And this has those sequences are just so cool and so well animated, obviously all pulling as references from those shows. But when you go in and you do your kind of like ultimate level of attacks and stuff like that, you just get these very awesome sequences set to music from the various shows. So it has the music from the shows in there as well. And that part of it, just the spectacle of the playing of it, is a hugely fun part of just kind of enjoying the various series and how they're represented. And you just do get crazy moments like having Choo-Choo in her Demi trainer with the big fucking sniper gun, and you have her attack the Woolgaru aliens from Majestic Prince, and there's a lot of unique dialogue in those sequences where Choo-Choo has this like says basically equivalent like, you fucking alien bastards, like get the fuck off of Earth, and then she shoots them, and having Choo-Choo have to talk about fighting aliens like actual space aliens is very great. It's just like the mixing of all that stuff. Same thing with Sleda. It's all the fucking Witcher Mercury characters are the funniest, because it's just the idea of Sleda being like fighting like she's like, she has one line, she's like, I never imagined that I would end up having to fight giant monsters, and she's like shooting a fucking Rodan from Godzilla. It's very crazy. So yeah, like I feel like I've played like 30 hours of this game. I still feel like I don't really understand it. And I feel like I don't know if there's any way for a person to understand it unless you're like in deep on a level. As someone who's a co-host of a fucking anime podcast, who did an entire podcast series that covered every single fucking Gundam, and I still look at the people who are into Super Robot Wars, I'm like, man, you have gone to a place I have not fucking arrived at yet. Like that's where this game is. It's like a humbling thing to engage with as a mecha fan, to see like how far I have to go. But it has prompted me to like go deeper. I'm currently watching through SSS Dynazenon, which is a very fun show. I've watched the entirety of Code Geass. This is finally the thing that made me be like, I have to fucking watch Code Geass. I have to actually do it, because one of my favorite characters in this game is Colin, who's one of the characters from Code Geass, and she is so fucking cool in this game. Her mobile suit is called not mobile suit, I guess, her mecha. It's not a Gundam show. But her mecha is called the Guden. You'd love it, Jonathan, because it's red, but it's got like a big fucking crazy hand that fucking just grabs shit and like blows it up, and then it turns into like a big like laser drill, and she just zooms through the air and just fucking cuts through these enemies. Like, she's a really powerful unit in the game. The character is very cool, and it just made me very motivated to watch Code Geass. Luckily, I already knew the ending of Code Geass, so I was not spoiled on it by this game. If you want to play this game and you care about spoilers and you have not watched Code Geass, just be aware that the first 5 minutes of this game is literally the very ending of Code Geass. Like, it's the last 5 minutes of the last episode of Code Geass is what this game opens with. Again, I already knew what that was, and I don't care about spoilers. But if you do, that is something to be aware of, is that's probably the most spoiler-ish thing I've encountered for one of the series in the games, of just like going straight in for the ending right away. Partially because this game, it's not Code Geass, it's Code Geass Lelouch of the Resurrection, which is the movie they made like 10 years after the ending of Code Geass, which is not a very good movie. But the series Code Geass is fantastic. The characters from Code Geass are awesome. The way they're represented in Super Robot Wars Y is incredibly fucking cool. And that's the joy of this game, is just getting to see the madness of all these shows, getting to sort of like revisit old friends like Camille and Amuro and Char and Sleda and Choo-Choo and all those characters. Be reminded of like that hero Yui, when you don't have to deal with some of the bullshit of Gundam Wing, is a very funny character. And I just love the way that hero Yui's portrayed in this game, and it's very good. And then meeting...
I did, Sean, I didn't want to say, I did play the demo for this game back when it came out. I haven't played the full game, and I agree with everything you're saying from what I saw about it. The best parts were just seeing Hero Yui interact with people not from Gundam Wing.
Yes.
Is just a gold mine. That stuff's fun.
Here's this, like, 16-year-old boy in a green tank top, and he's, like, just, like, the wild shit he says. It's so, like, they get it. Like, they get what is good about the Gundam Wing characters and what's fun with it. And he is by far the most powerful unit in the game. The Gundam Wing Zero is just fucking ridiculously super fucking crazy powerful. But yeah, so it's like half the fun is like meeting those old friends, but then the other half is like meeting these characters that you either never encountered before, or you kind of vaguely know, like Suzaku from Code Geass is a character I was aware of and had seen before, but I hadn't watched the show. And that like being the motivation for me, like, you know what, fuck it, I should actually watch Code Geass. And I'm glad I did, because I don't feel like people need me to tell them that Code Geass is very good, but it turns out it is very, very good. It has its reputation for a reason. It's a great, great show. Again, the movie that they made later is not so good, but that's not all that important. But yeah, Super Robot Wars Y, I don't know how you recommend this game to people. like, you know, if like you're looking for that kind of review, I don't know. I think you know if you're the kind of person who would be interested in this or not. But I have been having a huge amount of fun with it, and I am currently having a lot of stress figuring out how the fuck I'm like going to play this game and Ghost of Yōtei at the same time. Because I desperately want to keep playing Super Robot Wars Y. I want to see what happens in the story. I want to just see, and not just like the main story. I just want to see the weird scenarios with all the other characters. You know, just weird shit like they have this relationship between Domon and Sheen from Gundam Seed Destiny, where Domon's taken Sheen under his wing, and he's kind of trying to train him up as like a protege, and he's making him say the shit about like, we're like the masters of the undefeated of the East, and all that kind of shit, and it's crazy. Like, it's so
That's
bonkers.
fucking awesome. I want that anime. I want that fucking spin-off anime. Mobile Suit G Gundam Seed
Destiny. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, God.
It's fucking
That's great.
Bonkers.
Yeah. I mean, my sense with Super Robot Wars, from what I've seen from fans online, is that nobody who plays Super Robot Wars has seen all the anime, and that a lot of the people who are dedicated fans of Super Robot Wars are fans of these games and all of the crazy combinations.
Yeah.
And the exact thing you're talking about, Sean, of like the couple of characters they know really well and intersecting with stuff they know nothing about, that is the fun, because nobody could have seen all of it, or for the most part. I'm sure there's some super fans, but like, it's a lot of media.
Yeah, it's a lot of media, and it's like, and it's so different, and they're all over the place. And again, it's not even stuff that like is always popular or like acclaimed. Like, some of it is like weirdly obscure, or again, it pulls from like, it's not just like, here's all of Getter Robo. Here's like the Getter Robo arc anime they made in 2016. You know, it's like some of it gets very weirdly specific with what they pull from. Or again, it's like, it's not Witch from Mercury. It's Mobile Suit Gundam Witch from Mercury Season 1. And that's what's in the game, is just that part of Witch from Mercury. And there's like, it is like such an oddball thing. I imagine it has got to be one of the weirdest fucking video games to work on, just from like a rights and all that kind of stuff. Like, I just can't imagine the huge task you undertake as the studio making these games every time you make a new one, of like, what series can we get? How do we incorporate those together? How do we write a fucking story that somehow has like Getter energy and new types and the Zero system and coordinators from Gundam Seed and aliens and demons from beneath the earth and the fucking dinosaur empire and the insectors from another dimension. Oh, and also all the people from Beistenwell from fucking Dunbine, which is a fantasy world that's like where the souls of the dead go, I think. I don't know, because I haven't watched that show and I don't understand what it is. And then you have all the people from Patagonia world, which is where Heavy Metal Elgheim is, because I guess Elgheim's way more Star Wars than I realized it was, because it's in a galaxy far, far away, but they have to end up on Earth somehow. And somehow, someone has to write a story that brings all that shit and like 50 other things together into one video game.
Sean, do you want to go ahead and move on to the monthly 10?
What's going on with the monthly 10, Jonathan?
That's not how we usually go into that segment, but that's okay. All right. So, Sean, your challenge to me last month was the top 10 lessons that 14-year-olds need to be taught.
Yes.
Now, that's a pretty broad topic, and I'm going to tell you how I took it in a second. How did you intend it, if you intended it at all?
I intended it exactly the way that it was written. What is the top 10 lessons that 14-year-olds need to be taught? You know, it could be you think that they need to be taught what symbolism is. It could be they need to be taught, like, the nature of their own mortality. You know, there's, like, a huge spectrum of what it could encompass. I'm just hoping that I can bring it, you know, into my classroom in some form or another to inform my teaching.
Well, there you go. So there were several ways you could have taken this prompt. I actually started this over 3 times because my first idea was a different kind of joke idea. My second idea got way too sincere, and it was thinking about, like, well, they're going to grow up in an era of just, you know, political fascism and climate change. So how do we teach them, like, you know, networks of political radicalism? And I was like, this isn't right for this podcast segment. So finally I thought, okay, 14-year-olds, they're people entering high school. So I guess part of Sean's challenge implicitly is what do they need to learn by the time they get out of high school and thus into college where they meet me?
Sure.
So I kind of took this as 10 lessons I wish my freshmen had been taught as freshmen in high school. And then I can also make this super petty.
Okay.
So there you go. And I also thought you specifically said the top 10 lessons 14-year-olds need to be taught. The word lesson to me implies that we could just sit the 14-year-olds down and do this in an afternoon. Not that, like, I can't put on here, like, how to write good. Because writing good, that's several years of work, right? That is not one lesson. So this is, I think you could do, these could be 10 separate classes you could do, Sean. Yeah. Just one day, you know, 1 hour classes. That's what I was thinking.
Yes, that is like my general idea was that kind of idea. Yes, like what could I do in like an hour class to whip these kids into shape?
Yeah, so this is kind of based on the observations I make of 18 or 19-year-olds, specifically ones where I look at this and go, how did you not know this already? This is the kind of ones I was thinking of, right?
Yeah.
Roughly, this was a weird one to try to rank, but here's 10 of them, Sean. All right?
All right.
Number 10. That you are supposed to wait to see if anybody is getting off the bus or the elevator before you try to get on the bus or the elevator. This is petty, but I lived for 6 years in Iowa, and in my building, I didn't take an elevator much, and I didn't have to take a bus much. In Colorado at Boulder, I work on the 3rd floor of a building, and sometimes I work on, like, the B2 level, so I use the elevator a lot, and I get on and off the bus a lot. And the kids these days, Sean, they don't know that you're supposed to wait to see if anybody is getting off the elevator or the bus. Especially the bus. Half the time I'll be trying to get off the buff bus, and they'll just be trying to get in. I'm like, God, you have to fucking wait. You have to fucking wait. Or I'll be the one waiting to get on the bus, the, like, adult, and then the kids will all be kind of crowding it, and I'm waiting off to the side to see who's getting off. I'm like, why aren't you all doing this? And I just think you need to do a lesson on this, because I don't know how the kids don't know this.
It's very true, because honestly, this is a thing we have struggle with like just getting them into the classroom, because we have so many kids on my campus that we have a like staggered dismissal system where basically half the kids by alphabet are released first, and then there's a second wave that is released, so we don't have all 1,500 14-year-olds flooding the hallways simultaneously. And they very much struggle with the idea of, if there's still people in the room that need to leave, you have to let those people leave before you try to go in, because otherwise you're just going to hit each other and you're going to be stuck in a doorway until the end of fucking time, or you leave because they're in a closed space, they're in a room, they're in a box, they're trying to get out of the box that you're trying to go into. They have nowhere to go but out of the box. You've got the whole world to fucking step aside into to let them out of the fucking box before you go into the box. Fucking step aside. So yes, I agree. This is a lesson. I'm working on it. It's hard.
Okay.
It's not getting through. But you know, I agree that it's one that they need.
All right, number 9. How to make a PowerPoint that doesn't look like complete and total ass.
Yes.
I see, when I have my students do presentations, sometimes they're good. Most of the time, I look at it and I go, I legitimately don't know with the built-in templates how you can make a PowerPoint this bad. You have to work against what Microsoft gives you. And I've never used Google Slides. I assume it's the same thing. Like, I don't know how it looks this bad. I don't know how you have the text that off-center. I don't know how you have the text so weirdly spaced. I don't know why there are no images. I don't know what kind of off-white color you got that looks wrong against the text. I don't know how, it feels like more effort had to go in to make it look bad than to make it look good. And to be fair, I make PowerPoints for a fucking living. I've done it for many years in multiple jobs. I'm really good at PowerPoint. My PowerPoints look, and I also, by the way, to be perfectly frank, I think this about my peers sometimes too. I have been to job talks, like people trying to get a tenure track position at a university, where I look at their PowerPoint and I go, it doesn't seem like you want this job because that looks so bad. And so maybe I am just a snob. I am better at PowerPoint than anyone else I know. But I still look at students' PowerPoints and I go, how? I remember when I was their age in college, I worked really hard to make my PowerPoints look good. And I don't even think you have to work that hard to make your PowerPoints look good. That's why the software exists. It does it for you. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm with you on this. It's particularly for 14-year-olds. It's like because there's two kinds. There's, I think, for like one of the things you're talking about, like with other adults, there's just that sense of like they just don't know how to use it, and there's just they haven't made like a bullet pointed list where there should be a bullet pointed list, or they haven't like fucking capitalized. Like there's just a sort of like you're getting like even though they're not always actually that old, you just get the old person using technology vibe.
Yes.
For the young people, it's the like, why did you make the fucking background vomit green? Your text is red. Like what fucking planet did you get raised on that this is like an aesthetic that you think that would work? Like, can you read the text on this? No? Then why did you fucking do this? That's the stuff that drives me crazy is it's more the like, you don't know how the technology works, and so it just looks like super sloppy and amateurish. It's like you have somehow made some sort of conscious decision to make this actively painful to read as an observer. Like how and why have you done this?
Absolutely. Speaking of young people are bad at technology now, my number 8, how to competently manipulate a video game controller for basic genres of games. When I started teaching my own classes that involve video games, I did a little bit of this last year and I have a whole dedicated class to it this year, I thought this wasn't going to be a problem. I just kind of assumed that people younger than me knew how to hold a DualSense and knew that you move the right stick for the just knew all that. And many of them do, but I'm always surprised how many of them do not. And I know not everyone plays. I just thought it was more of like a universal thing now. And I've learned this with a lot of things that it is not. That like I think our generation, Sean, is probably the most technically competent, and it's downhill in either direction from there. And this is one of them where I've noticed that. I'm like, maybe this is a weird lesson to do in high school, how to use a video game controller, but I need you to teach your kids how to play an FPS for me.
Okay. I mean, yes. I mean, I'm with you that, it kind of ties into the earlier video game news thing of like, most kids who play games fall into the camp of the game that they casually play video games, right? And by casually play video games, I mean they play Roblox or they play Fortnite but it's on their fucking phone with a touchscreen, right? Yeah. They're not using a traditional video game controller. And those are people who probably would never have played any video games when we were in high school. And now, that's how they play games. So they do not and have not ever, they've played video games, but they've never interfaced with a traditional video game controller. And that is definitely like, there's a big proportion of young people that are in that camp.
This next one is super duper specific to me and my line of work, but it drives me up a fucking wall. I need you to teach the kids how to move around in a dark room without taking out their fucking phone and shining a flashlight in everyone's face. This drives me up a wall. So especially in my intro to film screenings, I can't get the kids to come on time. I've tried everything. A lot of them just won't fucking come on time. So you know what? I don't wait. If our screening starts at 3:30, I start the movie at 3:30 on the fucking dot. The second hand gets to 3:30, we're starting the movie. You can come late if you want. And the kids who decide to come late, they come in, the room's dark, and they decide, I need to take out my phone and shine a flashlight to find my seat. And no, you don't. All you have to do is stand there for about 10 to 20 seconds, let your eyes adjust, and you'll be fine. It's not that dark. I turn the lights off, and then I'm able to run around that room like nothing. I'm fine, and I'm older, my eyes should be worse, but I'm totally fine in the dark, and these kids just can't imagine not bringing out their fucking phone and using the flashlight, and I don't get it. This isn't hard. You're fine. Put it the fuck away.
To be fair to them, they have. This is not to be fair to the like they're taking out their flashlight to try to find their thing. That's that doesn't make sense. But in terms of them being late, they have been raised in a world where every movie theater shows 30 plus minutes of ads before the movie starts.
Okay, but they do this for my class where I talk to them too. So yeah.
Yes. So, but maybe you should just start that. Maybe for both your class and for screenings, you just start. First, you have to create a business where you're selling a product, and then you just show 30 minutes of ads for the product you're selling. Maybe some sort of multi-level marketing scheme, pyramid scheme style. They're selling them fucking like soybeans or whatever that they have to sell to 5 other people.
And then do I bill the university basically because I'm showing it on their campus?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. This way, you can both make sure that you start the movie after everyone's there, and you're a filthy sticking wrench until they put you in jail.
All right. Sean, it's the Trump administration. There are no business-related crimes that could put me in jail, man.
That's
oh,
a very
my God.
good point.
All right. Number 6. This one sounds like a joke, and I mean it completely sincerely. The kids need to be taught how to safely but efficiently pirate movies, TV shows, and music. The kids don't know how to do it anymore, Sean.
No.
I don't know if you've noticed this. They have no idea. They're, like, scared of it. I mentioned, like... I'll make the joke like, oh, where can I find this thing that I've brought, and it's a very rare thing that like only I have, or that I had to find pirating, and I'll say, go sail the high seas for it. And they're like, what do you? I'm like, I'm saying pirate it. And they're like, how do you? I don't even know how you do it. And I'm like, in our generation, everyone knew how to do this because we grew up post Napster. We all fucking pirated everything, and it was much more risky back then. It's very safe to pirate stuff now. You can do it very easily. And like, I actually especially think for film studies, like my students, I do think it's a necessary skill. Like, I think it's actually a very necessary skill to be able to find stuff that is not officially distributed, and even some stuff that is officially distributed. Now, my suggestions to make this an official part of classes maybe run into some legal problems, but I still think the kids should know how to do it, and it's weird they don't. This is part of, like, the technological curve I'm talking about. Like, Gen Z has grown up in such a weird era of like computing and Chromebooks and stuff that they don't actually know how to do anything on a computer. And this is one of those things that has gone by the wayside, and I think it's weird. Yeah,
this is something I've not encountered with students because it doesn't come up in the world of English literature. I've not, nobody's ever asked me how do I pirate the book or something like that.
Yeah.
But it is something I've encountered with my colleagues where, I have like if we need a digital copy of a text, I can fucking get you a PDF of Heart of Darkness. Look, it's like, hey, you need a PDF of The Great Gatsby. Like, I can get you something. It's and they're like always very sort of like it's like they're so kind of mystified by the notion that, look, if we really need a digital copy of this thing for this one student or whatever, I can get a PDF of it and it's fine. And nobody's going to care. The fucking government's not going to come into your classroom and fine you $1 million because you have a pirated PDF of fucking, I don't know, Lord of the Flies. It's like, not only is nobody going to do that, like fucking every AI company or whatever is just stealing it anyways. Why can't we? It's for at least
you're not profiting on it.
Yeah. It's a legitimate educational purpose. That's part of the copyright lines that you can use it for educational purposes. Now, I don't think they intended that in the sense of that you should just be able to pirate it online, but I don't give a fuck because I need to accommodate for the student. I need the digital copy. Fuck it. Here we go. The author of this book has been dead for fucking 50 years. Who cares?
Longer in the examples you just gave.
Yes.
But yes. No, I mean, I agree. And it's so easy now. I mean, you have VPNs now. We didn't have VPNs at their age. VPNs make all of this fucking trivial, and safe. So, yeah.
Hell, man, I live in Texas. If you don't know how to use a VPN in Texas, I don't know what you're doing because you can't go anywhere on the internet anymore.
You can't jack off without a VPN.
Exactly.
All right. Have you said that to your students? Oh, man, kids, you can't even jack off anymore without a VPN.
No, I've only said it to my colleagues, and so far HR hasn't said anything about it to me, so I think I'm fine.
All right, number 5. This is more of a traditional school thing. Basic MLA formatting. This is one of the major ways it's the easiest way to format an essay for a research paper. I was taught this in high school. I know you were taught this in high school, Sean. I assumed everyone was taught this in high school. But from my experience being a TA for many years and now an official professor, apparently nobody has been taught this in high school because nobody knows it. It's so easy. It takes maximum 10 minutes to learn. It's the easiest thing in the world. MLA basically just does it. It's such an easy format to use. And I've only met, I feel like, 5 to 10 college students who actually knew it. And I have a whole PowerPoint I have now saved of like, here's how you format a title, here's your header, here's how you do citations, here's how you do in-text citations. None of it's hard. Just do it like this, please. And I'm amazed. More people don't know it.
Yeah, no, this is one where I think part of it is, I think there just has been a huge backslide, particularly post-COVID, but just generally speaking, of like, kids are so far behind where they're supposed to be, that like, by the time they get to me, like, I'm often dealing with like, really, really rudimentary stuff. Like, not how do you do MLA formatting, it's like, how do you put quotation marks in, you know? It's like, it is stuff that they really should have mastered, honestly, in like 5th or 6th grade, and I'm having to do rudimentary, like, remediation on that level of stuff. So yes, it does not surprise me.
I'm still having to. Yes. I still have to, with like college students, be like, no, you capitalize titles and put them in italics. Yeah. You don't just write Citizen Kane lowercase with no anything, and you think that's okay. Like, this, what is this?
Yeah. So yes, it is. It's a fucking thing.
All right, number 4, how to read a fucking clock with a corollary of why it is important to show up places on time. So this is related to my last one, but like, just come to class on time. Just do it. Just come to class on time. Don't come in late. Don't come in while I'm already giving the lecture and then be really loud getting into your seat. Just read the fucking clock. Come in. It's not hard. You're fine. We all have the same, especially now, we all have the same clock. It's synced to the internet. We all have it. Come to class on time. It's important to be places on time. What is this? This is the most Old Man Yells at Cloud podcast we've ever done, Sean. But when did we go into temporal anarchy here?
Well, you know, I think this is one that I can't help you with because the problem is you're running into specifically is for freshmen in college. This is the first time in their life they've been allowed to be late to fucking anything.
I know.
Because up until this point, their fucking schedules have been run for them. So it's like the 14-year-olds that I work with, they have no choice but to be on time, or they are like somewhere in this building and someone is going to go find them. You know, they just don't have the ability to just choose not to be there. And so it is, I think that is, unfortunately, that's one that you're going to have to deal with. You can't kick that down to me.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing. Like, just read how to read the clock. Let's start there, and then we'll move on from that. But yes, it is the worst thing about freshmen is they just don't think there's any consequences for their actions, and it sucks. All right, my number 3. This is a real one. How to write an email. Yeah. How to, like, you're emailing someone. How do you do it? How do you, like, do you say dear? Do you say sir? You know, whatever you're going to say at the beginning. Or you just put the name. Write in complete sentences. You know, capitalize the words that needs to be capitalized. Have some kind of outro. It's just like the basics of writing an email that doesn't sound like a text message to your, like, one-night stand hookup. That's what I need people to know. And corollary to this is how to attach documents to emails. This apparently is a dead skill, and I don't get it. I have gone through so many things where the student will send me, like, their document, but there is no document in the email. And so I'm trying to find it, and what they've sent is, like, some kind of either Google Drive integration or SharePoint or something that I do not have access to.
Yes,
so I can't get it.
It's their private Google Drive that they have listed to, yeah.
Yeah. And so I emailed back, I'm like, please send me the document. And then they'll do it again. I'm like, okay, make a PDF and attach to this email. And then they'll do a PDF, but they'll put, and they do not know. And I'll get to the point where I realize they don't know that there's a function to just attach the file to the email. And that's for students who actually know how to email, because there's also students who, like, we use a learning management system at CU. Most colleges use this now, called Canvas. And Canvas has a messenger app inside of it that is so bad that there's actually now the faculty senate has come up with language to put on our syllabi that says, don't use that, email us, because we don't want to use your messenger app. We're professionals, email us. I don't monitor my Canvas messaging app. I monitor my Outlook like a goddamn adult. And they'll do that because they think it's like a chat function where they can just get me like, I'm Microsoft support, and I'm not. I'm a human being who works, regular hours. Not that people who work at Microsoft aren't human. You know what I mean, though. It's like, it's not I'm their teacher, like, email me. And so, yeah, if they know how to email at all, that's a win. If they know how to send an attachment, that's a fucking miracle. And I need them to learn both of these things because, again, it would take about 5 minutes to learn.
Yeah, this is a lesson that I do at the very beginning of the year is email, because first it's like here is where you get your email. Like here's what email is. For some of them conceptually they don't know, even though they've had the same student email account since they've been a part of this district their whole lives. They don't know, like, here it is, here's Outlook, here's the button, here's how you click it, here's where you click new mail, here's where you type in the address, here's what an email address. I mean, I have like I do the whole fucking thing. And then I grade them on the spelling and grammar and like the whole, because the content of it is sort of whatever. It's the spelling and grammar and the formatting is what I grade them on. And it's one of the first major writing assignments we do, because they are so bad at typing. They don't know like basic digital etiquette. They don't know how to access email. They don't know how to read email. They don't know how to send emails. And it's like, this is like the most practical writing task you could possibly be given. Like, I don't want anyone to fucking complain to me about, sir, when will he ever use this in the real world? I'm like, well, one, use everything I fucking do in this class in the real world, because guess what? You read and write constantly, you little shits. I don't say that last part, but I think it. It's like, it is literally your whole life. It's how you engage with yourself, others, your culture. It's everything you fucking do. It's filtered through the language that you use, you little fucks. So trust me, like, I don't care what you do in math. I don't care what you do in whatever. I mean, that shit's also important. But this is like everything you do in your whole life comes through the shit that I am teaching you. So sit down and fucking listen. And here is how you write a goddamn email. Because trust me, you're going to do it. You're going to have to do it. And you don't want to do it and come across like an absolute moron because, as you said, you're sending an email like you're texting your bro or whatever, and you forgot to put a subject like fucking line in it and all this stuff. And it's really frustrating, like how bad that is. And I'll also add on to yours of we use Canvas as the LMS for our class in high school. And that messaging app within Canvas is the most. I mean, most of Canvas is incredibly atrocious. It is like a wild beast you must tame to try to like get any meaningful usage out of it. I rue the day that this fucking school I work at used Canvas instead of Google Classroom, like the school I worked in Colorado did, because Google Classroom, not perfect, 1,000 billion times better than Canvas is at some of this basic shit. But Canvas is useless as a messaging app. People should be able to use emails. But they don't.
I wish you could disable. Like, I don't know why Canvas has it, and I wish CU could just say disabled, use email. Like, just it doesn't work on our, because everyone's Canvas is a proprietary version that like they label themselves. So anyway, I've never used Google Classroom. I've always had to in my professional life use Canvas. So I'm Stockholm syndrome with it at this point. I've learned how to love it. Which is really just how to live with it, but there you go. Yeah. All right. Number 2. How to keep a personal calendar with all your important dates so you don't schedule, for instance, a trip to a concert on the day of your college midterm and only let your professor know 5 days before the test, asking for your professor to go out of their way to give you a different test sitting just because you never checked the fucking syllabus to see when the midterm was. This might be related to a true story.
Yes.
Maybe.
I mean, this is another one where I'm going to have to, unfortunately, tell you that this is going to be a freshman college problem, because once again,
I know,
is the first time in their lives that they've been allowed to fuck up their schedule because they're being allowed to make their own schedule. You know, it's like they can't be like, oh, my math homework is on the same day as my English homework, and so I can't do it. It's like, I'm sorry, well, that's not how any of that works. But I'm sure that it is probably incredibly frustrating, though, that you're where you're at, that they are not going to know how to manage their personal life in that way with their responsibilities as a student.
It's galling to me, especially when I've gone out of my way to like put the date on the syllabus that was available to them before the class even started and that I highlighted on day one of class, and they only come up to me a few days, because they also don't think about what it means for me. They're asking me to take probably unpaid several hours out of my life to give them I have 160 students in that class, 1 out of 160, and do something special for them so they can go have a nice time. And they just haven't thought about that. They just think, I guess I'm an automaton who works for them. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, I think the thing you're missing is that they are the most specialist boy and or girl out of the 160 that deserves the most specialist treatment possible, and they're the most important person in the world.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you would love to take the time out of your day to go do this one incredibly menial, awful thing that's just annoying as shit, rather than have them, follow the rules and do it with everybody else as they were instructed at the very beginning of the year.
Indeed. All right, so my number one, this is the first thing I wrote down when I started brainstorming this topic. It survived through every version of the list, and it was just the one that is most obvious for, I think, the future. And it is just, I wrote down one sentence and I didn't write down anything else because I think everyone gets why this is number one, and that is why AI is bad and you shouldn't use it.
Yep.
There you go. And by that, I specifically mean the generative AI tools like, ChatGPT, that shit. Now, this lesson could be short. It could be long. You could go through how it kills your critical thinking ability. You could go through all of the environmental destruction it does. You could go through all of the horrible people who are in charge of AI today and how they're connected to, various forms of fascism. You could go into the really, really disturbing trend of AI encouraging people to kill themselves. There are a lot of different ways why AI is bad. There are a lot of different ways in which it just makes you less of a human being. But basically, I do think every 14-year-old should be taught why to be wary of this technology and why to avoid it, because they will just have a better, fuller, richer, and probably longer life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of it is also, if you're trying to use it to cheat, it's, the most obvious cheat
yes.
ever. It's bro, I don't need to copy paste this into some, reverse AI bullshit. No, I'm sorry, my friend, but you don't know what the word magnanimous is because you don't know how to use a period in your sentence. So I don't think you constructed this 12-sentence perfectly punctuated paragraph that has words like magnanimous and, specious and shit like that in it. It's come on. Please, for the love of God. And so, it probably didn't also, separate it into, bullet-pointed lists with capital fucking subsections and shit, the way that ChatGPT formats everything it writes. It's oh my God. At least at, I guess your level where they're writing full multi-paragraph essays is, a standard that it's maybe a little bit closer to that. But for 14-year-olds, when they try to use ChatGPT to cheat, it's the most hilarious thing in the world because, my man, you're nowhere near close to be able to, pretend you would be able to write this thing if you tried to write it. It's not even in the same dimension. You're not, it's and that's not even taking into account the fact that the answer's bad. It's everything else around it just, you're not even there. But also the answer doesn't make sense. I tried recently to use AI for something that I thought this might actually be something convenient that AI would give me a starting place for. And it was for an outline for this podcast where I was putting together the beginning of my Space Runaway Edeon outline. And I was you know what? Probably fucking AI could probably do this shit of just give me the starting point of make me the list of all the actors, the character they played, and a couple of the notable other roles that they have had. And I gave it the, here's how I've formatted this before. It's this should be totally doable. And the fucking first response it gave was so hilariously wrong that it was the wrong actress for the wrong character that was the lead character of the fucking show. Or the lead actress and lead female character of the show, and then every single role that it said, and also this actress is well known for this role, and this role, and all three of them were wrong, and all three of them were wrong because they were three different actresses that played three different other characters. It was as wrong as it could possibly be, and I'm this has got to be the most AI attuned fucking task I could think of. It's easily verifiable information being put it into a simple fucking list that the only reason I want AI to do it is just so I could copy and paste as a starter, and then I can tweak the couple of roles. But like the list it gave me was so error riddled and so fucking wrong that I was like, no, literally it would have been a much better use of my time if I had just started it from scratch off the top of my fucking head. I could have done it from memory without even looking it up better than this fucking shit could do for about like 6 of the main roles in this show. I was like, honestly, because it was the first time in a while I had tried to use AI for something like that. And I was flabbergasted by how bad the result was for something that I thought was a truly menial level, like clerical style task that is the kind of thing that generative AI should be good at. And it was so fucking wrong.
I got a good one for you, Sean. So I have my students do a couple of response posts over the course of the semester. This is an intro to film. And they're basically just basic little mini essay prompts about the films and readings to make sure they're doing the readings, but it's also practice for the midterm and final where I do have them write essays that are from prompts that are similar. And I got one. So I got the first response post was about the movie Cleo from 5 to 7 by Agnes Varda, famous French film. And I get a student emailing me after the due time, which is like midnight the day of, right? And they say, hey, I had a problem, like my internet went out as I was trying to submit, but I wrote it, here it is, can I send it to you? And I went, okay, this sounds like bullshit, but sure, it's the first time of the semester, I'll take a look at it, whatever. And he emailed me like close enough to the time that I was like, this is maybe fair. Then he sends me the thing and I look at it, and I swear to God, Sean, I kind of do a spit take of like drinking something as I start to look at the response, and I'm like, this is about a different movie. It's about a completely different movie. It was about a Jean Vigo movie or something like that. Like a completely different, it was French, but that was the only thing it had in common was it was about a French movie. And I'm reading it, I'm like, this isn't right at all. And I email him back, I'm like, what happened here? You must have sent me, is this for a different class? Like, this is me giving them the benefit of the doubt. And he explains like, oh no, this is a movie I watched in my free time and I just forgot the title and I put in the wrong title. I'm sorry, everything else is right though. And I look at it again and I'm like, kid, you're describing a different movie. Like, it's not just the title. The description is of a movie that not only you have never seen, I have never seen this movie. I sure shit didn't teach it in my intro to film class. And it is at this point completely clear to me that this had to be some form of plagiarism, either generative AI or he took it from somewhere else, because it just does not mention the movie. And I email him back and I say, you're getting a 0 on this. I can't prove what you did, but like, this is wrong, and like if it happens again, you're being reported. This is bad, and he has not emailed me back yet. So like, but like that was a red flag. Like, oh, you really cheated on this. This is bad.
Yeah, and I think like part of the thing is you're going to get a 0 on this because even if I didn't give it a 0 for the plagiarism element of you used AI, it gets a 0 because it's not the right fucking answer. And that's even when it's not the like, this is on a different movie or a different text or whatever. It's even when it's like, it's on the right text, but it's like generative AI is not good at answering these questions. It's good at giving you verbiage around a question, but it has no ability to access the actual like meat of the text and to give it a legitimate response. And so it's the kind of thing that it's like, if I am grading this on my rubric, you're not actually answering the prompt. The number one thing on the rubric that you have to be able to do is you give an accurate response to the prompt, and and the AI is not doing that to a level that is acceptable. It's like, that's like part of the thing I run into when I try to talk to these kids about them using AI and trying to use it for projects and things like that, is they try to tell me that like, it's like to give me a starting point and stuff like that. But I'm like, but it's giving you a bad starting point. It's starting you off on the wrong foot. It's not giving you an accurate answer. A better strategy is for you to stop, think, if you're having a hard time with it, raise your hand and I can come around and help talk you through it. But you could come up with a better answer than the machine because the machine hasn't read the book. It doesn't understand the book. It has no capacity of actually answering this question. It just has a way of stringing together words related to this question and key terms that it has investigated related to this question, but it can't actually answer it. Like, I've yet to encounter an AI response that I thought actually gave like an actual, like, straight down the middle, this is a good answer to this prompt. It can flurry with words around it, but it can't actually like get to the real answer.
Because all generative AI is it's a a probabilistic continuation of the word. So it just takes the words that go in, and then it predicts what the next word and the next word and the next word needs to be. And it's a complicated version of that, but that is not how you answer. That's not how anyone writes. That's not how you answer a question. Yeah. So, and I am still very curious how this student, like, whether it was plagiarized or AI, like, what did they do to get not just the wrong, like, it wasn't even the same director, it wasn't the same time period, it wasn't any movie similar to Cleo from 5 to 7. This is where I'm just like, what the fuck happened to get, and that they didn't have any self-awareness of that. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's like, you give me a response to this question about, it's like, oh, what was the movie? I can't remember. It was French. Give me this response about a French movie. That should be good enough.
Yeah.
He's not going to read it anyways.
That's where they're wrong. I read everything. All right. Sean, I got a challenge for you for November, for your birthday month. All right. So, as we are recording this, Sean, it's October 5th, Sunday. It is the weekend of the release of Taylor Swift's new album, The Life of a Showgirl, which I have right here on CD.
Okay.
And this album, it's the lead single from it, and track 1 is called The Fate of Ophelia. Yeah. It is the second single she has done in her career, where she retells a Shakespearean tragedy, now with a happy ending. Of course, her first big hit ever was Love Story from Fearless, which redid, it's the Romeo and Juliet song. And now we have Fate of Ophelia, about Ophelia from Hamlet. So, Sean, since you are a Shakespeare fanboy / English teacher, which I think are the same thing, but, you know, there we go. What are the top 10 tragic Shakespearean plot points and or characters that Taylor Swift or other pop stars like her could turn into hit love song singles?
This could turn into hit love song singles.
Yes.
Okay, so I have written down here top 10 tragic Shakespeare plot points / characters that Taylor Swift or pop stars could turn into hit love song singles.
I think that's basically it. If you want inspiration again, listen to Love Story, listen to The Fate of Ophelia. Basically, like, same idea of those songs, but with different Shakespeare plot points. Like, I want to hear, you know, for instance, what is the Falstaff pop song sound like? This is what I want.
Yes, I've you know, I can get from the end of King Lear the howl, 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 howl as he comes in cradling Cordelia's dead body. You know, I can get some good stuff. I'm glad you've come to me for this because, of course, I know a lot about, especially tragic Shakespeare. You know, I'm a little bit rusty on the comedies, but I'm very good on his tragedies. And I know absolutely nothing about Taylor Swift and modern pop music. 0%. I've never listened to a Taylor Swift song of my own choice or been aware of if I've heard a song that was a Taylor Swift song at the time that I was listening to it that it was a Taylor Swift song. Not to say that I have any, not out of like I think it's bad or anything. It's just I've never tried it and never really cared to. So I think I'm the perfect person to make this list. I think it's just exactly what the world needs is for me to make this list for all of you.